Welcome, everyone. This is your friend, the DN What If, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of What If Deku Listened to the Voice of the Flame? If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. Muzutafu, Japan. Year 2205, August 25th. Midoriya Izuku didn't think he'd ever been this excited. Sitting in the car on the way to the clinic, he was almost jumping up and down in his seat, desperate to arrive at the clinic. His friends had all gotten their quirks by now, and Izuku was impatient, itching for the chance to start training and become a hero, just like All Might. His 4th birthday had come and gone, and with no sign of a quirk by his 6th, his mother had decided to take him to the clinic to see what could be done. Izuku, calm down and sit still before I turn this car around. Midoriya Inko spoke in an exasperated tone, trying to be strict, but not quite able to keep the laughter out of her voice. She was a little on the younger end to have a child, but she loved the boy, despite his headstrong tendencies. Izuku was instantly still, the mock threat enough to quell the nervous energy coursing through his body, his 6-year-old self unable to hear the joking in her voice. "I'm trying, Mom, but I'm SSO dash," his brow furrowed as he combed through his limited, albeit advanced for his age, vocabulary, searching for a word to express the emotions running through him at the moment. Excited? Nervous? Inko suggested, trying not to laugh at her son's expression, with big emerald eyes narrowed to a slit and lips turned into the closest approximation a child could have of a scowl. As she spoke, however, his eyes widened and his face brightened into a wide smile, now able to put a name to his emotions. "Yeah, both of those. I can't wait to be a hero, I'm gonna save everyone." The family of two continued to laugh and joke as they neared the clinic, eager to see what the boy would be able to do. "Not gonna happen, kid." The doctor spoke bluntly. Izuku's smile froze on his face as he sat in the doctor's office. What do you mean?" His mother said from his side, "All of his friends have gotten their quirk and Izuku has been waiting for his dash." The doctor cut her off. "He's quirkless." Holding up an X-ray, he continued to speak. "This joint in his pinky toe, it's something that all quirked people have outgrown. Those with quirks have no second joint since their bodies have evolved further and deemed them unnecessary. Your son here has the second joint, meaning that he will not develop a quirk. He should give up his hero dreams before he gets hurt." Izuku couldn't understand some of the words the doctor was saying, but he didn't need to. The only thing he heard as his ears began to fill with the sound of 1,000 bees heading his way, an impossibly loud buzzing, was the word quirkless. It seemed to echo in his head, the word bouncing around his brain and starting to destroy his dreams. He wasn't paying attention to Inko's angry words towards the doctor and his insensitivity, or the questions she asked about a possible quirk in the future. He just sat there, tears beginning to fall down his face and onto his still smiling jaw. As Inko and Izuku left the office, the doctor stood up and strolled to his personal office. As he entered, his unhurried gait and bored gaze evaporated as he rushed past his landline and towards a phone hidden behind a shelf and called the man he had dedicated his life to. "Aizu." A deep, haunting voice spoke on the other end. The voice of a ruler. The now named Aizu shivered and almost dropped to his knees instinctively, the voice demanding not respect, but absolute obedience, and causing fear in the hearts of those who heard it. "This is an unexpected call. Tell me why you have disturbed me." The voice commanded. Aizu continued to shiver, adrenaline, fear and giddy joy flowing through him all at once. "My lord, I found you a gift. A boy came to my clinic today. He is missing the toe joint, but hasn't manifested a quirk at the age of 6. It must be powerful enough to not wish to harm the boy upon its awakening. This could be the quirk that tips the scales against All Might." Aizu had made a mistake. He felt it in his bones as the voice showed anger. "Do you believe I need a child's quirk to kill All Might?" The voice spoke. Despite keeping a reasonable volume, the question was asked through clenched teeth, anger and disgust hissing through his tone. "Do you believe I am not enough already to defeat that smiling oaf?" This time, the voice raised slightly, and at the slightest increase of volume, Aizu was unable to breathe, his throat closing from simply the voice of the most dangerous man on the planet. Do you believe that I need a new, powerful quirk to destroy him? I am all for one. I am the strongest force on Earth. I have toppled governments, destroyed countries, decimated populations, and you believe I need more. The voice was even louder now, not at the volume of a yell or far above a regular timbre, but the violence it promised leaked through the phone, the aura of death and despair that the voice carried, its presence forcing Aizu to the ground, kowtowing to the monster that once threatened the world. And no, my lord, I meant no insult. I simply want the safest outcome for your unmatched self. Aizu managed to choke out. Please, lord, forgive my impudence. The pressure vanished. Aizu inhaled air desperately, his body trembling at the force it had been subjected to. As he recovered, the voice of All for One spoke again. Be careful of your insinuations, doctor. The voice spoke his title mockingly. You are not invaluable, nor are you invincible to be insulting me like this. Yes, Lord, thank you for your graciousness, Lord. Aizu spoke haltingly, not believing his luck after making so monumental an error. I will remember your might for the future. All for One laughed. The sound was akin to the rumbling of the very earth, deep and grating. Aizu began to feel faint, and felt something warm drip down his lips. Oh, you will remember my power, the voice cooed. But rather than the future, you should take it with you to the afterlife. At that, Aizu felt his body freeze, as a purple mist began to form under his body, and a portal opened up and took him into a bar. There was a boy there, no older than 12, lanky and thin. He looked malnourished at first glance, but a deeper look showed a wiry frame, built for speed rather than power. He sat at the counter of a bar, head lowered as he began to turn towards the poor doctor. His hair was a light grayish blue, and his eyes were a menacing red, glinting with malicious joy and sadistic pleasure as he took in the sight of the cowardly man before him. Kill him, Tamura. The voice spoke in a pleasant tone, like he had just bought the boy a gift for his birthday, the gracious voice at odds with the threatening words. The boy, Tamura, began to smile as his head lifted, showing Aizu the marks on his neck and the skin that seemed to stretch unnaturally around his lips. He looked like his skin had been fastened to his body after he was born, stretched out and taut against his thin frame. Sensei, the boy crowed, you're too kind. I wasn't expecting a gift so soon after the last. As he spoke, Tamura stood and moved closer to Aizu, his hand stretching out as Aizu tried frantically and unsuccessfully to scramble away from the hand coming towards him, covered in peeling skin and calluses. As the hand grabbed his face, Aizu's last sight was the boy smiling wider than ever, and his eyes glimmering like a bloody lake before he turned to dust. Ha! Never fear, citizens, I am here. The voice of the #1 hero blared through the speakers of Izuku's father's desktop. The boy sat and watched it idly, the words still ricocheting around his mind, quirkless, quirkless, quirkless. He felt the words like they were a physical force, like a weight in his stomach and brain. Through the sound of the echoing word, he heard his mother enter the room, and looked to her, tears already spilling down his face and a wobbly grin still in place. Mom, see, can I still be a hero like All Might? Izuku was desperately hoping his mother would help him, would remove the weight of the word from his mind. Please, Mom, please, I need to hear it from you. I need you to dash. His thoughts were cut off by his mother's sobs as she ran towards him, unable to watch her baby despair any further. I'm so sorry, Izuku, she cried. I'm so sorry. His smile finally fell as his last hope was snuffed out. No, Mom, what I wanted to hear was dash. As his hope was extinguished, a new fire began to burn in his soul, small at the moment, but intense, raging with all the strength it could muster. As Izuku went to sleep that night, he thought he heard a voice, ringing through the chambers of his soul, Rest, child. Your power is not ready to be unleashed, but soon, child, soon, your flames will burn all of creation to ash, in the name of #$_ at $$. The voice cut out as Izuku fell asleep, hoping for a better tomorrow. 2 years later, Aldra Elementary School. The years had not treated Izuku kindly. The under-evolved boy was not given the better tomorrow he had hoped for. In fact, his life seemed to continue to slide downhill, as those close to him began to hate him. At first, it was stares and whispers behind his back, then they gained courage, and it turned into snide comments to his face and insults. When insults failed to incite the teacher's intervention, it became physical, pushing and shoving Izuku out of line for playground rides and excluding him from playing hero with the other kids. Until now, however, there was still one boy he could count on, his friend from birth, and his cousin in spirit, Bakugo Katsuki, the son of his mother's best friend. At the moment, Bakugo was leading them down through a small portion of the forest, the boys walking together as they trooped through the greenery until they came upon a small creek, with a log placed over it. "Kaken, maybe we should turn around, this doesn't look very safe to cross," Izuku suggested, gazing cautiously at the narrow and wet log that stretched over the water. "Or maybe we could look for a way further down and cross when the water is thinner." Bakugo sneered at him before scoffing and turning away in disgust. "Stupid Deku, I knew you were useless, but now you're a demon coward too? Stop dreaming about being a hero if you can't even walk over a stupid log." Izuku flinched at the venom in his friend's voice, and at the cruel nickname he had been saddled with 2 years ago, when Bakugo had learned of his quirklessness. "You're as useless as a doll." He had laughed when Izuku told him. "I know, I'll call you Deku, short for Dekunabu, how about that?" Despite Izuku's protests, the name had stuck, and soon all of the students began to mock him with the name. Izuku hated the name. It began to echo through his mind along with quirkless and "I'm sorry, Izuku," from the day he had been named quirkless, the worst day of his life so far. The words came to him every time he dared to dream. When he dreamed of being a hero or just being useful, of being somebody someday, the words would return, echoing louder and louder until his ego was crushed, and his hopes were destroyed once more. He hated the feelings that the name Deku created in him, hated the way it so easily connected to him, hated how he had begun to connect the insult to himself. He was snapped out of his thoughts as Bakugo shoved him aside, striding towards the log with purpose in his steps, and began to cross the creek. As he made it past the halfway point, he looked back, grinning widely, and began to mock Izuku. While normally, he would listen closely to his friend and hope for the teasing to stop, he couldn't help but zone out once he noticed the log beginning to move. As it started to roll in place, Bakugo slipped and fell off the makeshift bridge into the water below. When Izuku snapped back to reality, his body had already moved. He had jumped down towards his friend, and as soon as he landed, he held out his hand in concern. "Are you okay, Kaken? That could have been bad if you landed on your head." Izuku looked into Bakugo's eyes as he spoke, seeing the surprise and relief turn to confusion, then to rage as he saw Izuku try to help. "Stupid Deku! I don't need your help, you useless effing loser." Bakugo snapped, his hands beginning to smoke and spark in his anger, the smell of burnt caramel wafting through the air. Izuku stumbled back in fear upon seeing his friend so angry, the harsh words echoing in his head once more, as Bakugo began to march towards him. "You want to play hero so bad, Deku?" Bakugo snarled. "I'll show you what heroes do to people who get in the way of them like you. Everyone, for today's game, Deku is the villain." At those words, the boys all smiled, their target for the day clear in their minds. As the boys converged on Izuku, he closed his eyes and covered his head. "Please, please, please, someone help me. I don't want to get hit, I don't want to be the villain. Someone stop this." He cried in his head, knowing it was futile, that no one would want to help Deku of all people. As the hits rained down and his friends continued beating him, he began to think, "What did I do to deserve this? Does my being born mean that I deserve to get beaten like this? I'm not a mistake, or a monster, or a villain, I'm human too. Right?" As the beating continued, his thoughts turned darker, turned towards anger, and he felt a fire in his body, somewhere deep within him. He fed it his rage, fed it his sadness, and watched it grow bigger and bigger before something began to form from the core of the flames. Before he could take a closer look, he was knocked unconscious. As he fell asleep, he heard a voice, gentle yet strict, kind yet strong, and he listened as it began to tell him stories of great flames, stories of races turned to ash, and stories of a man so great he ruled for millennia. Izuku listened, and when he awoke, the voice was gone, but the stories it told were there, etched in his memory. 6 years later, Izuku age 14, year 2213, Aldra Junior High. Izuku had started to hear voices. Well, only one voice, but it was still something to take note of. He had just gotten back from a school day and opened his notebook, eager to watch and write notes on the latest hero news, when he saw his previous pages. The pages were full to the brim of the stories the voice told him about, stories of a civilization in the clouds, of monsters and the warriors who hunted them down to purify them, of fire hotter than endeavors and stronger than Bakugo's explosions. I wonder what that fire is, Izuku mumbled as he read over the stories the voice told him. I wonder how it got so strong if it was a quirk. That fire is of me, child. The voice sounded in his head as if on cue. I embody the power of the flames. It sounded almost wistful now, but Izuku had had enough. When he first heard the voice while awake, almost 2 years ago now, he mused, he had been excited, he had dared to hope that Dr. Aizu had been wrong, and then the new doctor saw his X-ray and dashed his dreams once again. No one with the second joint can have a quirk, he had explained, kinder than the last doctor, and based on these X-rays, you have that joint. While Izuku dealt with his world collapsing again, the doctor began speaking to Inko. I'll refer him to a psychiatrist and a quirk specialist. If he's hearing voices, he could have a mental illness, or he could be under the effects of a quirk. They can help him now, I can't. The quirk specialist determined no evidence of a quirk being used, but the psychiatrist, however, had some ideas. I think little Izuku here has developed an ID, she had said. He's bottling up his negative emotions and his desperate want for a quirk, and it's starting to form another, darker personality, hence why it wants to burn everything around it down. Izuku's dark side wants to harm the society that created it. She had told him to ignore the voice and its stories. Izuku hadn't felt crazy, but no matter what he said, he had no choice. Izuku had listened for the most part. He ignored the voice and didn't try to communicate with it, but the stories had a grasp on him that he couldn't ignore. The voice spoke with such passion, such fire behind its voice, that he couldn't help but be captivated. He had to write them, had to remember them, or he felt like his world would collapse. Shaking himself out of the past, Izuku began to write and eventually fell asleep at his desk. So passed a normal day in Izuku's life, and, unknown to him, one of the last normal days of his life. The next day began as usual. He left his house with a hurried goodbye to his mother, and began walking to school. What was unusual, however, was the giant villain rampaging through the city. As Izuku got lost in the crowd, he watched with awe as a hero arrived and saved a group of civilians from a piece of rubble. Oh my god, that's Kamui Woods. He squealed before his voice lowered to a mutter. He's a shooting star in the hero rankings, he just debuted a few months back, and he's already in the top 100. Villain. Stop what you're doing now before I have to use force. The hero declared, confidently and with the strength Izuku wished he had. If you won't stop then dash. Kamui cut off as a boulder was thrown his way by the villain, who roared unintelligibly. Very well then, villain, prepare yourself. As Izuku watched, the hero threw his arms forward, wood beginning to branch off of his arms and grow at a rapid rate. This is it. Izuku squealed again as he matched his voice with the hero's in preparation for the move. Special move, lacquered chain pre-dash. Canyon cannon. A loud, female voice yelled out, as a giant tan blur rocketed into the villain foot first. As the villain fell and shrank, the new hero raised her head. My name's Lady and this is my debut, she yelled. Pleased to make your buttquaintance, she ended her sentence with a sly, teasing tone. As cameras began to surround her, a man clapped Izuku on the shoulder. That was some analysis, kid. You trying to be a hero? Izuku smiled at the man and answered with as much confidence as he could muster. Yes, sir, I am. Izuku ran into the school, panting for breath and hoping he hadn't been late. He reached his class and opened the door. Mr. Midoriya, you're late. Sit down quietly and do not disturb your classmates. The teacher briefly looked at him upon his entrance, and briefly scolded him before putting his attention back to the board. As Izuku began to walk to his desk, his classmates snickered at him and put their legs out in an attempt to trip him, as per the usual. He walked to his desk, marked by the words, Deku, useless, and loser on the top in permanent marker, and sat down, pulling out his books and preparing for class. Today is our last day of classes, everyone. As you know, last week you all handed in your forms for which high school you would be attending, as well as your future career hopes and dreams. Now, normally, we would go over these one-on-one and discuss the viability of them, but he stretched out the last word and then threw the forms all over the front half of the classroom. You all want to be heroes anyways, he shouted. As he did so, the class erupted in cheers and yells as the students went wild for their dreams, before a loud bang got everyone to turn to the culprit. Bakugo stood with one foot on the desk and one on his chair, his quirk exploding into the air and forcing the attention onto him. What are you talking about, Teach? He drawled in his classic, arrogant tone. I'm the only one out of these FING extras who's gonna be a hero. See, made his declaration, he let out an even louder burst from his palm, causing Izuku to flinch back from his seat beside him. I'm gonna finish high school in this dead-end neighborhood, and then I'm going straight to UA University to be a hero. The teacher smiled, with what Izuku thought looked to be pride in his expression. You've got high hopes, Bakugo. UAU only accepts 8% of all applicants. A student from the front said, awe in their voice. I'm sure someone here will join you though. Bakugo scoffed. Fat FNG chance, extras. I'm gonna be the only one from this shithole to be a real hero. Oh yes, Midoriya, you put UAU down for your future hopes too, didn't you? The teacher interrupted Bakugo's spiel. Izuku sat straight up and looked to the front in shock as everyone's eyes turned to him before the classroom burst into laughter. What are you gonna do, Deku? Gonna ask the villains nicely to give up, or throw a notebook at them? A student mocked. You're gonna get yourself killed, Deku, not that anyone would miss you anyway. Another said through their laughs. Izuku looked down at his desk and tried to ignore the words of those around him. I've been told I'm useless since I was 6 years old. I can deal with this. He thought to himself before a hand that seemed to be hotter than usual gripped his shoulder tightly. He looked up to see Bakugo staring down at him with a smile, his eyes closed tightly. There was no trace of happiness or joy in his smile, only menace and rage, and as he inhaled to begin talking, the teacher called out for everyone to sit down. Bakugo growled, this isn't over, shitty Deku. We'll be having words about this. You'd best believe that. Izuku froze in terror, his body trembling as his tormentor for 6 years loomed over him. Despite his fear, the day went smoothly until the bell rang to end class. Izuku began frantically packing up, desperate to escape, when a hand, this time definitely hotter than normal, gripped his shoulder again. Where you trying to go, Deku? Bakugo hissed from behind his teeth, mouth still warped into that frightening smile from earlier. Didn't I tell you we had to talk? Bakugo forced him back into his chair before he could begin to speak, staring up at him and his group of friends. What's this? He asked, grabbing Izuku's notebook. Hero analysis for the future number 13? Bakugo laughed loudly before putting the book between his hands. Wait, before Izuku could get the sentence out, Bakugo blew the book to pieces, before throwing it out the window. Izuku stared as months of work and analysis went to ash right in front of him, sadness and anger warring inside of him, before Bakugo began to talk again. See, I have my whole life planned out. I'm gonna spend 3 years in this shitty school for high school, and then I'm gonna move on to greener pastures, go to you, the first from this fuckus neighborhood, like an underdog story. Bakugo seemed to preen in the light of his future glory, before snapping back to Izuku, his hand heating up even more. But when a quirkless nobody tries to compete with me, tries to upstage me, I can't help but get angry, you understand, right? As Bakugo leaned in, no longer smiling, but instead glaring at Izuku, Izuku felt truly afraid. What if he kills me right here? Izuku thought, fear overtaking his rational thought and the anger from earlier as he trembled in his bully's grasp, sweat pooling on his forehead at the sight of his personal demon glaring at him. K-Kak and I don't want to upstage or compete with you, just thought there was no harm in trying. He managed to squeak out, his voice barely overcoming the fear in his throat. The hand on his shoulder started to smoke, as Bakugo burned through the fabric of his uniform and into his skin. Izuku started trying to wriggle his way out of the burning grip. K-Kaken, please, it hurts. He cried out as the cronies grabbed onto him at Bakugo's signal. Good. Maybe now you'll give up on your FNG pipe dreams. Bakugo snarled. All pretenses of a chat dropped as he gripped even harder. Izuku cried out, pain taking over his mind from fear as he began to smell his skin burning. I'm the only one from this school who's gonna be a FING hero, get that through your head before I kill you. After what seemed like hours, Bakugo let go of his shoulder, the smell of burnt flesh and caramel wafting through the air, and patted him on the back as Izuku shivered and writhed from the pain he had been dealt. Without a quirk, you can't be a hero, Deku, he spat out before smiling again. But hey, if you want an easy way to be one, I'll help my old pal. Izuku looked up, wondering what he meant, trying to fight through the pain. Take a swan dive off the roof and hope for a quirk in your next life. Bakugo said, disturbingly happily, maybe God will take pity on your useless self and let you be an extra instead of a pebble in your reincarnation. He laughed as he walked away. Izuku knelt on the floor, tears welling up in his eyes as the words joined the rest in his head, destroying whatever self-confidence the man who complimented his analysis gave him in the morning. He stood up slowly, wincing at the pain in his shoulder and trying not to move it before limping out of the class to find his notebook. He found the remains in the fountain, with a fish trying to get dinner from them. Stupid fish, that's not lunch. He muttered, grabbing it out of the fountain and shaking it out, hoping something survived. As he walked, he thought about his day. Stupid Kaken, what if I did kill myself? That would go on your record and then you'd never be a hero. He continued muttering about the pain he felt both mentally and physically as he walked, before the voice sounded in his head. Why not burn the boy to ash? It suggested. He wouldn't be so violent as a burnt corpse. Izuku tried to ignore the voice but answered back, accidentally aloud. I can't be a hero if I kill someone. He looked up as he spoke, taking in the beautiful summer sky. Well said, kid, now how about you be a good little boy and come save me? A voice spoke out, sounding like a man talking underwater. Izuku looked straight and saw a giant sludge man rushing towards him before engulfing him in his body. You're a real hero, kid. I just need to take your body so I can get away from him. The villain spoke with panic in its voice as Izuku scrambled to escape. He felt the slime ooze up his nose and into his ears before he had to open his mouth to breathe, and he was immediately drowning in slime. Is this how it ends? He thought bitterly as he choked on the slime. Am I never going to be a hero? Am I going to die in this alley with no one knowing my name? Unbeknownst to him, his body began to heat up, as the fire in his soul burned brighter and brighter until, haha. Both Izuku and the slime froze, Izuku in hope and the slime in fear, and watched as a manhole cover in front of them burst from the ground and All Might burst up. Have no fear, citizen, for I am here. Texas. He drew his arm back and inhaled before shouting, smash. And Izuku lost consciousness. Wake up. Young man, wake up. Izuku awoke to the feeling of being lightly smacked by a cast-iron skillet. As he tried to remember what happened, he shot up and opened his eyes wide. All Might. He screamed, looking in front of him at the behemoth of a man, at the symbol of peace. Ha! Yes, it is I. All Might boomed. Now I must take this villain to the police station. Thank you for supporting me, young man. Wait, All Might. I need to ask you something. Izuku scrambled to his feet desperately. He needed to ask him. He needed the symbol of hope to support his hopeless dream. Unfortunately, the work of a hero never stops, young man. I must leave you now. As All Might prepared to jump, Izuku felt the desperation of his situation settle in, and before he could think, he had already grabbed All Might's leg, and now he was hanging on for life as All Might jumped higher than the buildings around them. As he snapped to reality, he started screaming. What the hey? Young man, what are you doing? All Might exclaimed, This is incredibly dangerous. You must let go. Even with the wind blasting past his face, Izuku managed to respond with what he thought was reasonable given the situation. I can't. If I let go, I'll die. He screamed, hoping All Might could hear him over the rushing wind. I suppose that's right, let me land. As All Might landed on the roof of a high-rise office building, Izuku slumped off of his leg and began gasping for breath. Young man, that was incredibly dangerous. What if you fell or if the villain got away? I needed to know, Izuku wheezed. I needed to know if you thought that a quirkless person like me could be a hero like you. As he asked, Izuku shut his eyes and bowed, fear of rejection and nerves running through him as he rambled. I was born quirkless, but all I've ever wanted to do since I was a boy was save people with a smile. I want to help people, that's all I've ever wanted. So, can I be a hero like you? Izuku ended his question and stood up before taking a deep breath and opening his eyes. In front of him was a skinny blonde skeleton of a man. Whoa, holy shit! Izuku screamed. Who the hell are you? An All Might imposter? The skeleton took a deep breath before letting out a sigh. I am All Might, he said, resignedly. Liar! Izuku yelled, his heart thumping incredibly fast. All Might is 7 feet 3 inches and 600 pounds of pure muscle. You are a skeleton without muscle. The skeleton sighed again, this time with irritation, before lifting up his shirt. Izuku paled and almost vomited at the sight of his stomach. Where his lung would be, there was a giant purple crater that seemed to carve off half of his lower body. It looked like a bullet launched out of a cannon had hit him, and then he had sewn the two halves of his body together. I obtained this injury 5 years ago. A villain blew a hole through my body and I lost a lung and half of my stomach. I can only be in my hero form for 3 hours a day now. 5 years ago? Izuku muttered. No way Toxic Chainsaw did this to you. The man chuckled. You know you're heroes. But you're right, this wasn't Toxic Chainsaw, it was a villain so evil, I wiped his name out of history after our fight. But, back to your question. Izuku straightened up, the hope for the #1 hero to affirm his desire pushing back the despair of the day, temporarily making him forget the words Bakugo had spoken, but before he could get too hopeful, All Might opened his mouth and spoke the words he would never forget. Be realistic, young man. Izuku's jaw dropped, and it felt like his stomach had fallen out of his body, tears falling down his face with reckless abandon. Even with the power I have to force myself to smile, to remind people that I am here, but my smile can be empty. It's a symbol of reassurance, but it's also a symbol of weakness to me. I can only smile for 3 hours a day. Without a quirk of your own, you would be a liability in the field. Izuku collapsed, his world shattering as his idol crushed his dreams mercilessly. His hope was gone, and all he could hear was the words of his past echoing in his head. Take a swan dive, Deku, you can't be a hero, and now, be realistic, young man. He felt like his head was going to pop, like he was going to throw up and pass out at the same time. His shoulder was hurting, and the world was closing around him, and everything was too much, and he just wanted it all to dash. Stop. The voice was firm in his head, steady and calming to his damaged psyche. Stop these thoughts, young Izuku. He couldn't stop his response in his state. Unable to control himself, he screamed out, unaware of All Might's departure from the roof. What do you know? You're a voice in my head that wants me to burn things, burn people. He caught his breath. You've never helped me with anything. You want me to kill my free dash? His voice caught on the last word. He couldn't call them his friends, not after what they had said. Kill my classmates. His voice quieted, he was spent. The voice was silent for a while before he heard it again. When you feed me only negative emotions, I will respond with negative thoughts. The voice said, I am a representation of your soul, of the fire that burns within you. When you feed the flame anger and sadness, that is all I can output back to you. The voice sounded sad now, but Izuku was too busy thinking of what the voice had said. Our dash, he paused, taking a breath. Are you my quirk? He asked. The voice spoke once more, with more strength than it had ever spoken with before. I am the embodiment of fire. I am the strength behind the sun. I am the savior of humanity and my name is... The voice cut off. It seems that you aren't ready to hear my name yet, child. Izuku gasped, feeling the heat within himself grow and grow. He felt fire burst into life in his soul and grasped a handful of it, grabbing the handle of something within him. What does that mean? And why am I so hot? His breaths came out in gasps of hot air, his lungs burning and sweat gathering on his body like he had run a marathon. Before the voice could speak, he heard an explosion from nearby. Turning wildly, he caught what looked like the smoke from a fire. A villain attack? Let's go check it out. He thought as he began running towards the fire. The voice continued to speak. I am the representation of your soul, child. Your desire to burn creation to ash was born before me. I am just your vision of it. Your inability to hear my name means you can only handle a fraction of my power. Lost in listening to the voice, he almost ran past the fire. Stopping quickly, he pushed his way to the front, hearing whispers about the villain. He's got hold of a hostage, poor kid, the heroes can't do anything in case they hit him. Izuku recognized the heroes at the sight, Kamui Woods, Death Arms and Emi Lady. He was about to begin his usual muttering spree when his body froze at the sight of the villain. The slime villain from earlier. He screamed in his mind. How did it get away from All Might? His blood rushed away from his face as he remembered grabbing onto All Might's leg, the same leg that had the bottle of sludge villain in it. This is my fault. I stopped All Might from putting this villain away. As Izuku scolded himself, he could hear the heroes yelling. My arms would burn and get blown away by the fire the hostage made. Kamui yelled, I can't get any closer. My punches won't do anything against a liquid opponent. We have to wait for someone with a better quirk. I can't transform into my full size in this crowd, I'd kill someone. As Izuku heard this, his body unconsciously moved to the front of the crowd, needing to see who he was making suffer. He froze as he recognized ash-blonde hair and ruby-red eyes, normally shining sadistically and now wide in fear. For the umpteenth time in his life, Izuku's body moved without thinking, as he shoved the crowd and heroes aside to get to his childhood friend. What the F am I doing? He wailed in his head. I'm going to be a liability like All Might said I would. Why am I running? As he ran, the voice came back to his head. You've already grasped it once, child, now you must unsheath it, release the fire of your soul. When he came close enough, the slime villain noticed him and laughed. You again? Too late, kid, you missed your chance. This guy's gonna be my meat suit to beat All Might now. As the villain fantasized about his future victory, he raised Bakugo's hand and made it spark. Izuku closed his eyes as he ran, searching for the ever-burning blaze within what he now knew was his soul. He hesitated for a split second upon finding it, and then stuck his hand into the fire and grasped the materialization of his soul, screaming with effort and pulling with all his might. He opened his eyes and saw the slime villain directly in front of him, with Bakugo looking at him in recognition. As he looked to his side, it felt like time slowed down. In his hand was a beautiful sword, covered by a royal purple sheath. He pulled at the handle, revealing the prize within. The katana, he realized slowly. It was a simple sword, the steel forged in such a way as to make a pattern of flames down the blade, leading to a golden tsuba and a handle wrapped in the same purple fabric as the sheath, with a diamond pattern going down the sides. He stared at it for a second before snapping his eyes up and glaring at the sludge villain. His body began to heat up, and a visible haze settled over the edge of his new sword. Now strike, child. The voice roared, strike with all the anger in your soul and save the boy in front of you. Izuku let out a guttural howl and focused his anger at Bakugo into the edge of his blade, fire igniting around him as he struck slightly above Bakugo's head. As he struck, a wave of fire leaped off of his blade, slicing through the explosion the villain was planning on sending towards him, through the villain, and evaporating parts of the sludge above Bakugo's head, and continuing until it hit the back end of the alley, leaving a deep scorched gash in the concrete. He willed the sword away before running towards the remaining slime and pulling Bakugo out. What the F are you doing here, Deku? The blonde sputtered, trying to eject sludge from his. And what the F was that? Izuku looked at him and smiled, tears of fear running down his cheeks. You looked like you needed help. When Izuku looked away, however, the remaining sludge regathered its shape and loomed above them. You effing brats! He roared. I was gonna be nice and let you be my disguise, but I'll kill you both and escape instead now. The slime reared up and created a massive tendril that looked ready to smash into them. Izuku scrambled frantically to get a hold of his fire again, but he wasn't able to get a hand on it in time. He closed his eyes as the sludge came down on them, bracing for impact. Impact that didn't come. Instead, he heard what may as well have been the laughter of God as All Might burst onto the scene, protecting the boys from the sewage arm. I told you that you couldn't be a hero, that you'd be a liability, and here you are proving me wrong, young man. You did good, now watch how a hero takes care of business. All Might pulled his arm back, muscles like suspension cords tensing as he prepared to take the villain out. Smash. As he punched, the air around him seemed to collect before blasting outwards with a deafening boom. He broke the sound barrier, Izuku dimly realized. He punched so hard his fist broke the sound barrier. The pressure from the attack blasted the villain to pieces, unconscious and weak, before the visibly air-rending attack pushed through the clouds and continued out of eyesight. In front of the stunned crowd of civilians, victims, and heroes, it began to rain from the pressure of All Might's attack. While rain started to fall, the crowd recovered and began cheering for their symbol of peace. He changed the weather with a single punch. He saved the day again, that's All Might for you. I wonder what the heroes were going to do if All Might or that kid weren't here. As topics began to change, and people began to swarm All Might to get his autograph, the three heroes on scene were taking care of Izuku and Bakugo. Izuku was staring at his hands. My quirk gives me a fire sword? Wait, I have a quirk? Before he could panic and stress himself out too much, Kamui Woods grabbed his shoulders. Kid, that was a real brave thing for you to do there. You bought the blonde enough time for All Might to come. But I need you to realize that was illegal. You can't use your quirk willy-nilly like that. Izuku stared at him numbly before looking back at his hands and muttering something Kamui couldn't hear. What did you say? The hero said, facing his ear towards the boy to hear him better. I didn't know I had a quirk, Izuku said, still staring at his hands. That's the first time I've ever done anything like having a quirk. Kamui stared at him, shocked into silence by the admission. Izuku stared back, equally shocked. I have a quirk, he said, numbness wearing off and slowly being replaced with excitement. I have a quirk, he repeated with more energy now. I can be a hero. Kamui looked at him and laughed, partly out of happiness for the kid and partly out of absurdity. You have a quirk, he agreed, and a demon good one at that. I'd be happy to have you as my intern if you're planning on being a hero. Izuku's eyes shone as they looked at him, disbelief and joy fighting for the top spot in his body. Before they could continue, the police, who had arrived a short time ago, called Kamui to ask for his statement. He patted Izuku on the back as he left. I wasn't kidding, kid, look me up when you graduate. Izuku stood up and began to walk home before he proceeded to pinch himself. This isn't a dream, he stated, astonished. I have a quirk. Before he could get home, his walking was stopped by a hand grabbing his shoulder and spinning him around. He found himself facing Bakugo, who looked sick and angrier than ever before. Before he could open his mouth, Bakugo started talking, or rather, yelling in his face. I didn't need your help, Deku, he roared. I was doing perfectly fine on my own. I had that fucker right where I wanted him, you useless sack of shit. What makes you think a worthless shitbag like you could help me, of all people? I don't owe you anything, and you're still just a pebble on my road to being number one. Izuku was once again forced into silence, and before he could come up with something to say, Bakugo stormed off, leaving Izuku in the middle of the street, staring at where he used to be, before turning his gaze back to his hands. I have a quirk, he said to himself one more time, before deciding to go home and show his mother. As he turned to walk, he was interrupted again, this time by a massive shape jumping in front of him. He jumped back and was about to run when he recognized the form. I am here, to speak to be. All Might had jumped in front of Izuku, deflated into his skeleton form, and coughed up blood all in a very small time frame, the surprise resetting Izuku to his usual nerdy self. "Oh my god, All Might, are you okay? Do you need a tissue? I can give you my jacket dash." All Might held up his hand to stop Izuku's rambling, and Izuku felt his jaw click together as he forced himself to be quiet, vibrating in place at the sight of his former icon dripping blood from his mouth. At the reminder of what All Might had said to him, Izuku stopped vibrating out of excitement and started shaking. "If All Might scolds me for jumping in, I don't know what I'll do. I can't be a hero if All Might says I can't. Honestly, what was I thinking even jumping in to begin with? Now I proved that I was a liability that needed to be saved and dash." Before Izuku could continue, All Might chopped him on the head. "Seriously, kid, you've got some real self-confidence issues." All Might chuckled. "I wasn't planning on scolding you for jumping in. I came to ask you a question." Izuku slapped his hands over his mouth. "I said that out loud?" he squeaked, face turning red in embarrassment. "Wait, never mind that. What do you want to ask someone like me? What was going through your head when you ran at that boy? Why did you want to save him?" Izuku blinked. "I didn't think of anything," I blinked, "and I was already running at him. It's like my body moved on its own." All Might grinned, somehow matching his smile's size to that of his muscle form, which was a little freaky in Izuku's eyes. "That, young man, is what makes a true hero." Izuku heard the words, then processed them, and then felt his body react. He fell to his knees as hope surged through him, the fire within him burning brighter and hotter than even when he was fighting the slime villain. He waited with bated breath to hear the words that he had been denied his whole life, starting with his mother at 6 years old. "Mom, what I needed to hear was, 'You, young man, you can be a hero.'" As Izuku heard the words he had craved for 8 long years, and took them in, he began to cry for the 3rd time today, this time out of pure happiness. "Is this really not a dream?" Izuku thought to himself. "Developing a quirk, saving Bakugo, All Might telling me I can be a hero, this is something out of my fantasies. This is no dream, child." Izuku perked up as the voice spoke into his head again. It had been quiet since the sludge villain, and Izuku could feel his curiosity burning a hole in his mind. Izuku took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. "What are you really? You said you were the embodiment of fire, but you said you were the materialization of my soul, too, so how can you be both? And, with that in mind, why have you only activated now instead of 10 years ago when quirks normally activate? Are you even a quirk? Rather, are you my quirk, or are you the effect of someone else's? I mean, quirks are supposed to activate at 6 and mumble dash." The voice chuckled. "Slow down, child, we have time yet for you to get your answers." Izuku snapped his head up, feeling embarrassed yet put at ease by the voice's comforting tone. "Tonight, while your body rests, I will grant you audience, and I will answer your questions then. For now, I must sleep, child, the day's events have taken a toll on me." Izuku was about to acquiesce before he remembered something important. "Wait!" Izuku cried. "See, can I still access the fire when you're asleep? And what do I call you?" He waited, heart beating out of his chest, for an answer. He needed the fire, not just as proof for his mom, but proof for himself that he wasn't worthless, that he wasn't a liability. "I sense your conflict, child, but you need not be worried. The flames may originally be mine, but the body I and the flames reside in is yours, therefore, the flames are yours. As for my name, for now, you may refer to me as whatever you wish. You are not ready for my true name, nor the power it brings." Izuku nearly fell over in relief. He had been fighting the voice and the instincts it brought for years now, unknowingly fighting against himself. "I wonder what else I can do," Izuku mused. "The fire the voice told me about was stronger than endeavors. Will I reach that height one day?" He imagined himself about 2 feet taller, with a beard made out of fire, and shuddered. Maybe model myself after a different fire hero. Lost in thought, Izuku almost walked past his house. Walking up the steps, he reached to grab the handle when he stopped. "What am I gonna tell Mom?" He worried. "I can't just walk in and pull my sword out of the air. I'll give her a heart attack. What do I do? What do I do? What doido hat doi dash?" Izuku's spiraling was cut off by the door opening to show his mother on the other side, looking like she was going to throw out the trash before she saw him. He froze, standing in front of her with his hand raised to open the door. His brain shorted out, and in lieu of a better idea, he decided to do what came naturally. "Oh, hey, honey, do you mind throwing this dash?" He pulled the sword out of midair. His mother fainted. After carrying his mother inside and throwing out the trash, Izuku waited for her to wake up. "Oh man, what did I do that for? I was supposed to bring it up calmly and show her carefully, not pull a fire sword out of thin air. What if I scared her too badly and she doesn't wake up? Did I kill Mom? Am I a murderer? I can't go to jail." As Izuku questioned his actions, he saw his mom begin to wake up and rush to her side, feeling a mix of relief and fear. Relief that he had not, in fact, killed her, and fear over her reaction to his new sword. "Izuku? When did you get home? You know, I just had the strangest dream. You came in and pulled a sword out of the air." "I mean, what kind of dash?" As she turned to face her son, she realized he was, in fact, holding the sword she thought she had dreamed about. She fainted again. Izuku continued his murder spiral. "So, the voice in your head is actually your quirk. And that quirk is also the embodiment of fire, which allows you to summon a sword? And that sword lets you create and control fire? And you used it to save Katsuki from a villain made of slime? And All Might saw you do that and said you could be a hero?" Izuku wasn't sure how to feel. He knew his mother believed him most of the time, but he couldn't help the fear that was rising up within him. What if she took him back to the psychiatrist, but to get medicated this time? What if he was hallucinating the sword right now? He felt tears prick at the back of his eyes as worst case after worst case flashed through his mind before he felt hands on his face. He looked up through teary eyes to see his mother looking back at him with an equally teary gaze, regret and sadness flashing through her eyes. "I'm so sorry, Izuku." He felt a pang of something in his stomach. Those words had echoed in his head for so long, but something felt different this time. He didn't know what, but the sense of anticipation he felt was almost unbearable. "I'm so sorry I didn't support you or believe you." She apologized again, tears falling freely now. Izuku felt terrible. What kind of son was he to make his mother cry? He opened his mouth to console her, but before he could speak, she raised her hand, halting his speech before it could start. "I should have supported you that day, Izuku. I should have believed you when you said the voice wasn't yours. I should never have told you what you could and couldn't do. I was a terrible mother to you, Izuku. I never believed in you. I should have trusted you from day one, and instead I chose others over you again and again. I let my worry for you control me." Her voice was wobbly now, Izuku noticed, as tears fell down his face. He curled up, starting to sob as his mother apologized, but something was missing, something was wrong, and he couldn't help but think back and remember. "So let me try again." He looked up, past the tears to see her give the biggest smile she could, and his sobs redoubled at the sight and at the sound of what she said next. "You can be a hero, Izuku." He couldn't hold it anymore, his voice breaking and the volume of his sobs increasing as he rushed towards his mother and held her closer. All he could do was repeat thank yous into her ear as mother and son bridged the gap created 8 years ago. Izuku lay in his room, eyes tracing the ridiculous amount of All Might merchandise. He wanted to forgive his mother, at least he thought he did, but if he really wanted to forgive her, why couldn't he get rid of the pit in his stomach when he thought about accepting her back into his life, back into his dreams? After all, he thought, uncharacteristically darkly, the last time I trusted her, she sent me to a shrink. His thoughts stopped, unsure of the darker path his memories had taken, but shook his head to clear it out. "Enough of that, Izuku." He slapped his face to clear his mind. "Mom changed her mind. She says I can be a hero now. And so did All Might." He paused, a smile forming on his face as he recalled his hero's encouragement and the task he had been given. Flashback. "You can be a hero, young man." As Izuku took in the words and sobbed, All Might deflated again, wiping the blood off of his chin as he stood in front of Izuku, who looked up at his idol, eyes glimmering with tears as the man, larger than life yet more fragile than glass, turned to leave. "Meet me at Dagoba Beach tomorrow at 6 a.m. Young man, I'll make a hero out of you." With those parting words, All Might walked away, Izuku's eyes following the man's path before he turned to leave as well, trying in vain to wipe the tears that flooded his eyes. End flashback. Izuku smiled at the memory, before a sobering thought flashed through his mind. "He only told you could be a hero because you have a quirk now," what sounded like a twisted version of his own voice sneered. "If you hadn't followed Bakugo's advice and tried to kill yourself via villain, you'd still be a worthless Deku, a liability." He shook his head again, trying to rebuke the words as he settled into a fitful sleep. Izuku's eyes opened to what looked like the ceiling of a boiler room. As he sat up, he took in his surroundings and saw he was in some sort of hallway, brightened slightly by a dim yellow light. A maze of pipes stretched along the walls and ceiling of the passage he found himself in, some dripping a strange orange-colored liquid. The hallway seemed to stretch forward with no other passage to turn or retreat into, an unending path towards a heat that tried to pull him in. "Where am I?" he mumbled groggily, still sitting on the damp floor. "Did Kaken and his friends throw me into a sewage tunnel?" As he regained his bearings, he shot up, eyes widening as he remembered what the voice had told him. "I will grant you audience." This must be where the voice resides, Izuku guessed, which means this is my soul? As he looked around, Izuku felt decidedly unimpressed by the state of his maybe soul. A sewer? Really? Does this mean my mind is dirty? Am I a pervert? The sound of a water droplet hitting the ground drew his attention, knocking him out of his thoughts. He looked towards the pipes and walked towards them, his eyes focused on the orange liquid that dripped from them constantly, his thoughts filled with curiosity about what the liquid could be. He reached the wall and tentatively placed his hand directly under where the liquid was dripping from, waiting for the next drop. He watched a drop form as the liquid collected directly over where Izuku's hand waited, and he watched in fear and anticipation as it fell onto his hand, marveling at the sight of the strange liquid, until it began to burn. Izuku yelped, shaking his palm to get the drop of burning liquid off of him, before frantically blowing on his palm to soothe the burn. He hissed, grabbing the wrist of his hand, feeling like he had put his palm on a branding iron, but when he looked at his palm he noticed the lack of reddened or burnt skin. He looked back at the pipe, palm stinging with pain, and felt his interest in the oddity rise. Liquid fire? Or maybe lava? It's orange, so it can't be water, but what's making this flame ooze flow through my body? Izuku debated the properties of the mystery liquid for a little longer before facing the outstretched passage once more. He gulped, feeling the heat radiating from in front of him dry his skin and throat of all moisture, before steeling himself and moving forward, to the center of his soul. Izuku walked forward, the heat continuing to increase until he felt like he was being steamed alive by the fiery pressure. He stopped in his tracks, doubt rising in his throat as he looked at the seemingly infinite path before him. "I can't do this," he thought despairingly. What was I thinking? Deku can't be a hero. I'm better off giving up and turning around before I get myself killed. He started to turn, pivoting halfway around before he froze, remembering the voice's declaration. "I am the strength behind the sun." Izuku gritted his teeth and faced forward once again, drawing strength from the power of the voice. "It believes in me," he thought desperately. "It thinks I can be strong, that I can be more than Deku." He moved forward, eyes fixed on the floor as he forced his feet to move, one in front of the other, trudging through the heat that settled over his body like he was being burned alive. "You can be a hero, young man. All Might believes in me. He thinks I can be a hero like him." Izuku was forced down by a new wave of pressure, his body folding until he was hunched over, shaking as he tried to keep moving. Taking a deep breath, clenching his teeth and glaring forwards, he pushed his body past its limits as he continued to walk forward. He could feel his muscles screaming, his bones rattling, and his brain warning him to stop, to take a break, but still he marched forward, overcoming the oppressive climate. He walked while the heat continued to increase, and the pressure pushed down on his already crooked posture. He walked until the heat felt like a million little knives pushing into every inch of his skin like he was being burned alive, and the pressure was what he thought being at the bottom of the ocean would feel like, and he was forced to stop, his body unwilling to put itself through more pain. Izuku glared at his treacherous limbs, willing them to move, but not even all might could make his body undergo this torture. He gritted his teeth and dug deep, forcing his body to take just one more step until he froze, involuntarily letting the air hiss out of his locked jaw. As the words seemed to echo around him, he felt the name like a physical weight atop the already immense pressure on his body. Still, he remained standing, legs shaking as the weight grew until, "Not gonna happen, kid." This time, the words were whispered into his ears. He could feel them like a pressure in his mind, like his head was going to pop, explode like Kaken's quirk. He was forced to remember the day his dreams died, the day he was diagnosed as lesser, as subhuman. Now, he was forced onto a knee, the pressure on his body and in his mind growing until, "Take a swan dive off the roof and pray for a quirk in your next life." The words surrounded him, blanketing him in the rage they caused and increasing the heat until he could resist no longer, falling to his hands and knees as tears welled up and evaporated instantly in the blaze that surrounded him. He was being consumed by the flames it burned. Burned. "You can be a hero, Izuku." His mother's voice felt like a cool breeze in the heat around him, lightening his burden and lowering the heat around him. His eyes widened, tearing up once again before they sharpened in determination. "One more." He gritted his teeth. "I can do this one more time. Stand up, Izuku. Stand up and make your mother proud." A vicious cry ripped its way from his throat, resounding in the air around him as he stood up and forced his unwilling body forward. "Move, damn it." He screamed at himself. "Move, Deku, move." The sounds of his footsteps echoed as he stomped his way forward, his body straightening as he recalled his mother's words and drew as much courage as he could from them. Soon he was walking again, slowly and painfully, but with his back straight and his head held high, resisting the pressure of the words as he started to increase his pace. He sped up as much as he could until he was running through the halls, the words of his quirk, his idol, and his mother propelling him forward until he collapsed as he ran past the exit and collapsed as the heat and pressure vanished. He staggered as he stood, body aching and stinging, his skin feeling like he had been burned at the stake, and felt like an ant in front of the spectacle he beheld. He saw a grand chamber, golden pillars surrounding him and brilliant, blue flames upon rows and rows of torches. He saw walls plated with gold and artwork, a ceiling bejeweled and shiny, and in the very center, a blindingly bright and gargantuan flame, almost reaching the ceiling of the equally large chamber. Behind the fire was a throne, golden and covered with jewels, amethyst, ruby, sapphire, a purple sword sheath resting against one of the armrests. Before he could continue to lose himself to the room, Izuku's attention was drawn back to the fire when it started to speak. "Congratulations on passing my first test, child." Izuku blinked. "First test? That was a test? There's gonna be more tests? Are they gonna be worse than this one? I don't think I can handle worse than this one. Oh man, what if the next test is to light myself on fire? I can would have a heart attack and dash. Enough, child." Izuku gulped, his jaw clicking shut as he stared at the fire ahead of him. The voice was stern now, almost disappointed. "I do not mind your inane speech, but I will not suffer a coward as my wielder. If there is another test, you will undergo it, or you will lose the flames. Do not make me withhold them from you, child." Izuku was sweating now, his mind overtaken by the fear of losing his newfound powers, of being Deku again, of being worthless again. Izuku slapped his face with both hands. "No, I will not be afraid again. I will be a hero, and I will not fail." He glared at the fire ahead of him before taking a deep breath and letting it out, straightening his back, pulling his shoulders back and lifting his chin. "I have questions for you, voice, and I would like it if you would answer them." His voice was alien to his ears, steady, not confident but not stuttering or mumbling either. Voice was silent for a time, allowing Izuku to stew in his thoughts, and while the exterior was still in his most upright and confident posture, his thoughts were not. "Oh my God, That was so rude. What if voice decides to just get rid of my fire for talking to it like that? Am I going to die? The voice broke its silence with a laugh, deep and throaty, its amusement clear through its tone. Good child. My wielder must be strong, both in body and in spirit. I might listen to a brat, but I won't listen to a spineless one. Izuku nearly sagged in relief, but caught himself before he could relax too much. The voice seemed to have a volatile temper, and he didn't feel like antagonizing it further. First of all, he cleared his throat as his words started to catch, his throat still recovering from the intense heat he had placed on his body. First of all, are you really my quirk, and if you are, why did you show up so late? This was the question Izuku had been desperate to ask. He needed to know what this power was and if it was his, why it had taken so long to manifest, why it hadn't saved him earlier. The voice hummed, apparently pleased by the question, before it answered. Let me start by putting you at ease, child. I am what you would call your quirk. If it noticed Izuku collapse in relief, it didn't show it, continuing to talk. I was born of your soul's desire to change the world. You prayed for a quirk that would let you be seen as normal, yet you despised that a quirk is what would make you normal. I am formed of that hatred of the system, of that desire to destroy and rebuild. Izuku swallowed hard. It felt like a jagged ball of glass was forcing its way down his throat as he processed the words spoken to him. Destroy and rebuild felt awfully like something a villain would say, but as he opened his mouth to refute the voice, he paused and thought back to his childhood. Would I want another quirkless child to go through what I did? He questioned himself. Do I want more Dekus in this world? He shut his mouth and swallowed his argument as he realized that the voice was right. He did want the world to change, and he was willing to be the one to do it. The voice continued, ignoring Izuku's aborted attempt to argue. As for why I manifested so late here, the voice paused, apparently considering something. Why don't you try and guess? It suggested, based on the test today, why did I not awaken sooner? Izuku felt his anger rise, but shrugged it off and thought about the question instead. It said based on the test today, but what could that have to do with a late manifestation? Izuku brainstormed for a little longer before an idea flashed into his brain. The test was painful. He exclaimed. If I had gone through this test at a younger age, I would have failed. The voice hummed, not quite satisfied. That's partially right. You might have failed this test at a young age, but at the same time, you hadn't suffered as much at a young age, so the test might also have been easier then. Izuku blinked. But then why dash? The fire would have cremated you. Izuku rocked back as the words hit him like a truck. It. Your body would not have survived the fires of your soul. The voice continued, mercifully patient. Until yesterday morning, the fires were too strong for your body to handle. You would have been immolated almost immediately. Izuku stared at the ground, searching for the question that was itching in the back of his brain. What changed? Why can I use the fire now? Your vessel has matured. The voice answered, simply. You have reached an age where the fires will no longer harm you. Izuku focused on breathing as he struggled to understand, before drawing himself up and exhaling. When you spoke to me before the sludge villain, your voice was more coaxing than it is now. It's like your attitude changed overnight, and speaking of, why do you call me child, anyways? Wouldn't you have been created at the same time as me? The voice huffed, slightly amused. I was nicer to you before because I needed you to talk to me. Now that you're here and listening to me, who do I need to persuade? Izuku hung his head and sighed. So, you're going to keep acting like this? The voice chuckled. This is my true self, after all. For the second part of your question, I call you a child because, compared to me, that is what you are. I am much older than you, child. Izuku's brow furrowed as he considered the words, turning them over in his head. But you said you were born of my hatred. If anything, you should be younger than me. That would normally be right, but time flows differently here, child. In your mindscape, your soul, 5 hours have passed, including your test and our conversation so far, but in the outside world only. 1 hour has gone by. For every minute you are alive, it has been 5 minutes for me. The 8 years between my waking and now have been 40 years for me. I am effectively almost triple your age, child. Izuku's jaw dropped. His quirk had been growing 5 times faster than him. If that was true, it was no wonder the voice called him child. It had been forced into self-reflection for 40 years because of his actions. Izuku couldn't imagine it, having only one person able to hear his voice, and then having that person ignore him the whole time. It sounded like torture. Though, he mused, it does answer the question of how it knows its abilities so well. 40 years stuck in this space? It must have trained itself to its limits out of sheer boredom. Izuku was overrun by guilt. He had forced the voice into solitude out of ignorance, detained it in isolation out of fear. He bowed to the fire, arms trembling as he struggled to find the words to apologize. I forgive you, child. He looked up, confused. I know what you're thinking. I know your actions were born of ignorance, not of malice. Ask your next question before I lose patience. Izuku straightened, taking a moment to recenter himself after what he had learned. All right, next question. Where am I, and what was the liquid leaking down those pipes? This room that we are in now is the root of your power. The voice explained. This is where your fire is generated, and the room closest to your soul. The hallway you arrived in is your mindscape, a reflection of your mental state. Talk about down in the dumps. Izuku joked weakly, his mind running 1,000 miles an hour as he tried connecting the dots. So the pipes, I'm guessing they carry the fire from here to the rest of my body? The voice laughed again, delighted. The pipes carry the flames through your body. Once your body awakens, your very blood will run with the power of the blaze. Izuku felt a smile come to his lips at the sound of laughter, but schooled himself to ask his last question. You said earlier that the fire is of you, and that you can control how it acts in my body, but now you say it's mine. So how are you the fire, yet the fire is mine at the same time? The voice was silent for a minute or two before speaking again. The fire is mine, that is true, but I am yours to wield. I hold the power of fire, and I am your weapon. Therefore, you hold my power as yours. Izuku tilted his head to the side, confused at the answer. But I thought you were the fire? The voice skid in disapproval, causing Izuku to look at the ground in shame. The fire is of me, not part of me. You are a smart boy, I know that, so think back and recall what allowed you to wield my flames. Izuku, afraid of disappointing his quirk again, racked his brain trying to recall the moment he had used the flames for the first time, unconsciously looking down as he thought. My body heated up, and then I shot a wave of fire from the edge of the dash. He snapped his fingers together and rocketed his head up, gazing at the fire with confidence in his eyes before walking forward and reaching into the core of the blaze, his fingers touching and then grasping the handle of the sword, pulling it free of the inferno and holding it above his head. The voice laughed, the sword vibrating as it did so. Good. You understood quicker than even I was expecting. I will be your blade, child, and I will grant you permission to wield me. $$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$ $1. When Izuku woke up the next day, it was in confusion. It was a weekend, so why was his alarm going off? He thought about the question as he opened his eyes and saw his usual All Might posters staring back at him. He squinted at the posters, dissatisfied. After all, they couldn't match the real thing. Wait, the real thing? He thought for a second before he remembered his promise to meet All Might. Jumping out of bed, he scrambled to get dressed before rushing out of his house, pausing to gaze at himself in the mirror for a second before he bolted. He paused, staring at his reflection, and was disappointed in what he saw. He wasn't awfully short, at an alright 5 feet 4 inches, but he wasn't as tall as a lot of his classmates, and he was scrawnier than a noodle. He rolled up his sleeve and tried to flex, staring embarrassed at the visible lack of muscle present despite his strain as he tried to make anything pop out of his arm. He sighed, putting his arm down and preparing to leave before he could discourage himself further, but before he could, a now familiar voice rang out in his head. Now that we have open dialogue, the voice began, you must begin to develop this twig of a body. At present, if you tried to swing me more than once, you would be liable to dislocate both of your shoulders from the weight of my blade. Izuku put his head down in shame for a moment before recovering and lifting his head with determination shining through his eyes. I will make myself worthy of wielding you, I swear," he declared, before deflating as the voice snorted. "Didn't I make myself clear, child? Currently, I am only allowing you to wield me. I am permitting you to borrow my power, but you have a long way to go before I acknowledge you as my wielder and give you reign over me." Izuku nodded again, determined once more. "I know, but I will make it happen, I swear it on my soul." The voice hummed, approval radiating from it before it spoke again, a teasing lilt now present in its tone. "Don't you have to go? There are only 10 minutes until your promised meeting time, after all." Izuku's eyes bulged as he confirmed the time, before resuming his wild dash out the door and down to the trash beach that was Dagoba Municipal Park. By the time he got there, Izuku was panting like he had run for an hour rather than the mere 8 minutes he had managed, but he wasn't late. As he looked around, searching for the sight of All Might, a hand clapped on his back. Startled, he jumped up and turned around to see All Might in his skinny form, grinning down at him. "All Might!" he shouted before All Might's hand grabbed his mouth while the man looked around furtively to make sure no one was nearby to hear his slip-up. "Keep it down, young man. Do you want the whole city to surround us?" Izuku shook his head sheepishly before peeling All Might's hand off his face. "All Might," he said, quieter this time, "can I ask what you called me here for?" The hero grinned again, wider this time. "Firstly, when I'm in this form, you can call me Yagi." He paused as Izuku almost squealed in excitement, vibrating as he listened. "I know All Might's name," he crowed, before realizing something important. "Ah, my name is Midoriya Izuku, Mr. Yagi." He beamed up at his idol, feeling joy well up in him at the previously impossible situation. The man chuckled, ruffling Izuku's hair as he did, with Izuku barely holding in a squeal at his idol touching his hair, before continuing. "I asked you to come here to ask you a question, young Midoriya." He paused as Izuku nodded vigorously, waiting for him to continue. "To be a hero is not just to beat villains, it is to keep your community satisfied and happy with your presence." Izuku nodded slowly, wondering where this was going. Yagi's grin widened, a hint of malice present now, before pointing behind him at the piles of trash. "Don't you think all of this is stopping your community from being happy?" Izuku paled at the insinuation, Yagi letting out a booming laugh that failed to provide him the comfort he normally derived from it. "A true hero is one who helps on every level of society. Let's start you off with some community service. Your task is to clean this beach up before you finish your first year of high school. We have 3 years to make a hero out of you, and it's going to start here." Izuku swallowed as he stared at the monumental heaps of trash that surrounded him, as far as the eye could see. He inhaled sharply before squaring his shoulders and turning back to his new mentor. "I'll do it." He spoke earnestly and with all the goodwill he could manage, hoping that Yagi would see his determination. "Amazing!" Yagi's smile stretched out before dimming slightly. "Before that, however, young Midoriya, I must ask you something important." The serious tone the conversation took shook Izuku out of his starstruck state, looking nervously as the #1 hero put a hand on his shoulder. "Where did that sword come from in the slime villain attack?" Izuku relaxed as relief washed over him. "Funny story, actually." He laughed. "Turns out the voice in my head was a quirk." Yagi paused for a second before taking a deep breath. "What does that mean, young Midoriya?" One long, convoluted explanation later. Izuku watched as tension seemed to drain out of the symbol of peace's body, confused about what had worried him so much. Before he could ask, however, the man clapped his hands together with a smile back in place. "Well, young Midoriya, I think we've dilly-dallied enough. It's time for us to get to work. And by this, I mean you. With this, Become a Hero American Dream Plan, you'll be a hero in no time." Looking over the booklet, he saw not only hours of training, but eating and sleeping times along with time to study neatly mushed into a schedule for him to follow. Moved over how much time this must have taken his now mentor, Izuku felt his body heat up as he gathered his determination. Izuku gulped as the trash began to look even bigger as he imagined cleaning it, but before he could panic over the logistics of cleaning a whole beach, the voice spoke out once again. "When you finish cleaning this, I will teach you how to use the powers of the fire and how to use a sword skillfully. Don't waste time here, lest you be clumsy with your flames. Izuku perked up as he heard that, his determination renewed as he imagined himself, taller, more muscular and swinging his sword to save people, providing people with hope and reassurance that he would be there, and walked towards the first pile of trash, grabbing the first thing he could see. Month 1, April, 2213. The first month will be the hardest. All Might had warned. You're going from almost no physical activity to heavy lifting basically immediately. You must follow the plan unless you want your muscles to tear and your body to break. Izuku nodded, feeling like he had understood, but now, with the month almost over, he felt like Yagi had understated the difficulty, if anything. His body was in pain almost constantly, and while he was managing to keep his grades high so far, it was still the beginning of his third middle school year, and things were only going to get harder. Izuku steeled himself. This is what it takes to be a hero. He reminded himself. This is only the beginning, I have to keep going, I have to be a hero. His determination renewed, Izuku continued to clean the trash, ignoring his body's pain. Month 5, August 2213. Young Midoriya was overworking himself, Yagi noticed, frowning as we watched the boy struggle to stay focused. He had almost collapsed the other day, and Yagi was beginning to worry that the boy would permanently damage himself. After watching him flinch while carrying a microwave, Yagi decided enough was enough. Young Midoriya. The man's voice stopping the boy in his tracks. You haven't been sticking to the schedule, have you? It wasn't a question. I made that schedule as the ideal way for you to develop, young Midoriya. If you work too much, then you will only harm yourself in the long run. Moving towards the boy, he put his hands on his shoulders and kneeled, looking the boy in his teary eyes. Why aren't you following the plan? Izuku took a second before explaining. I was a late bloomer. Everyone else has been working to be a hero their whole lives, and I've only just started taking it seriously. I need to finish this training so I can learn to use my quirk like they can, and to learn all the other skills that they already have. I can't fall behind any more than I already have. The boy was heaving now, his words having spewed out of his mouth with a fiery passion. Yagi was moved almost to tears. The boy knew his shortcomings and was determined to overcome them. How could he not be proud? Buffing up, he enveloped the boy in a hug. Young Midoriya, your passion has inspired me. I too will work to be a greater hero than I was yesterday. Yagi held the boy close as he shouted out his encouragement before deflating again, now holding the boy like a kitten from his shoulders. But seriously, follow the plan. You'll cripple yourself like this. Izuku nodded fearfully as the possible consequences of his actions sank in. Yagi could only hope the boy continued to listen. Month 9, December, it had been a long 9 months, Izuku thought as he stared out over the clean expanse of sand from the road above the beach. Not only had he cleaned the beach ahead of schedule, he had done it perfectly, not a single speck of trash remained on the now pristine sand, and the water glimmered in the cool winter air, free of the junk that had once floated on its surface. The beach was beautiful when it was clean, Izuku had realized, white sand and azure waters. It could have been a resort location had it not been for the piles of trash. Staring out into the ocean and lost in pride for his work, he was startled by his mentor's voice from behind him. Oh my goodness! Came a shout from a buffed All Might, astonishment, pride and awe present in his voice as he took in the work his pupil had put in. This is beyond any expectation I had, young Midoriya. Izuku smiled wearily. It had been a long morning of him cleaning the beach before school started, but still, pride surged within him at the words from All Might. I went plus ultra, Mr. Yagi. He replied, beaming up at his mentor. I wanted to get it done before the new year so I could bring Mom here to celebrate. All Might laughed heartily. I couldn't have given you any motivation greater than a mother's love, young Midoriya. But what I can give you is my blessing upon you, in the hopes that you become a hero even greater than I one day. Izuku felt tears sting his eyes as the words of the man sunk in, before pride and awe turned to worry as he saw the time. Oh shit, I'm gonna be late for school. He screamed as he checked his phone. Sorry, Yagi-sensei, I have to run. Yagi watched the boy sprint to his school, noticing his broadened back and shoulders, the new cords of muscle that bulged out of his arms as he gathered his belongings and smiled fondly, before his expression morphed into a more pensive one. "I can't offer you my power yet, young Midoriya," he muttered, taking a page from his apprentice's book. "But maybe if you get into UA, I can keep an eye on you, make sure you continue to uphold the ideals of a hero." He smiled at the thought, imagining a bright future, before walking back to his truck. A hero's job never stopped. Dollar 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 line break dollar 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 dollar. Izuku wasn't completely out of breath, surprising, he thought, given he had been running at a steady pace for almost 15 minutes now, hoping to make it to his class on time. He had taken his uniform jacket off and was running with it slung over his shoulder on top of his bag, leaving him in a tight, black undershirt that he had worn to clean up the beach. Arriving at the gates, he slowed and took a tentative sniff of his shirt, hoping desperately he didn't stink too much, sighing in relief as he couldn't pick up any unbearable smells coming off of him. He checked his phone for the time and blanched. "I only have 2 minutes before class starts," he screamed internally, picking up speed as he ran through the halls, bursting through his classroom door before the bell rang, and bending at the waist slightly to catch his breath. As he straightened up and began to walk to his desk, he was confused as the usual jeers didn't follow him as he proceeded, most of the class staring at him quietly. He was confused further as 1 or 2 girls near his seat blushed as he approached them before sitting down. "Why are they looking at me like that?" he wondered. "Do I have something on my face?" Looking down in an attempt to understand what had caused everyone to forego their usual insults, he blushed, mortified, as he realized his jacket was still off, revealing the tight black shirt underneath, clinging to his newly developed muscles. As he fumbled with his jacket, trying to put it back on, he missed the ruby-red eyes glaring at him from across the class under a cloud of ash-blonde hair, and the sound of teeth gritting from a familiar face. Izuku nearly jumped with joy at the sound of the bell, eager to wash the grime of his early morning training off of his body and crash for the rest of the day. Swinging his backpack over one shoulder and walking towards the door, he made it halfway to the door before a hand gripped his shoulder, and the voice of his nightmares cut through his hopes of rest and relaxation. "Deku," Bakugo growled. "I thought I told you to give up on your bullshit dreams. Did you miss the FING message?" Izuku shivered, starting to sweat as he recalled the numerous times Bakugo had tormented him, his body freezing as an instinctual response to his tormentor. "I've been watching you, you know," he continued. "Ever since that Sludge villain, you started acting differently, acting like you forgot your place again." A grin spread across Bakugo's face as he raised his hand, sparks and smoke emanating from his hand as he readied himself to ruin another of Izuku's school uniforms. "Let me remind you, Deku, just how useless you really are." Izuku watched the hand descend towards him like it was in slow motion. Still frozen in fear, he closed his eyes, awaiting impact. "Oh boy!" his quirk roared. "I told you I would not suffer a coward as my wielder." Izuku's eyes swung open at the reminder that he was different, the reminder that he wasn't useless anymore before they narrowed as he felt heat run through his body and reached for the fire in his soul, grasping and pulling the sword out of his mindscape and, his body moving before he could think, leveling it at the blonde's face, heat rising off the blade in a visible haze. Bakugo froze, sweat dripping down his face as the tip of the sword's scabbard rested in between his eyes, his hand inches away from Izuku's face, still sparking as he looked at the sword, confusion and fear running through his face. "I'm not Bakugo." Bakugo's eyes snapped to him at the name, confusion flitting across his expression at the lack of the usual kaken. "I awakened my quirk late, the day I saved you from the sludge villain. I'm going to you, and I'm going to be a hero. Nothing you can do will stop me." Izuku's eyes glowed with confidence in the words he spoke, far removed from the stuttering boy he had been almost a year ago. Izuku blinked as the heat filtered from his body, his eyes raced across the room as he struggled to understand what he had gotten himself into, taking in the sight of his bully in front of him, eyes still focused on the blade pointed at his head. His face blanched, realizing what he had done, stumbling away from Bakugo, the sword disappearing as he did so. He ran through the door before Bakugo decided to kill him, his mind racing at the unforeseen situation. What did I just do? He wailed in his head. I just threatened Bakugo. He's gonna kill me. Oh God, where did that come from? I could have sworn my body was frozen. His quirk preened within him. He could feel the fire going larger as if it was puffing its chest out. I gave you a little boost. It boasted. No wielder of mine will cower before trash like that. Izuku stopped in his tracks as he thought about that. You can affect my emotions? He shouted aloud, drawing strange looks from the students in the hallway around him. He blushed before continuing his run out of the building. I mean, he continued at a whisper, you can affect my emotions? The voice snorted as if offended. What I can do is not as simple as affecting your emotions. I effectively burned the fear you felt towards that boy out of you, leaving the anger you felt towards him as the main emotion you felt towards him. The fear, as you noticed, came back. That is because I cannot burn away your feelings permanently so recklessly, it would almost certainly destroy your psyche. What I did instead was let the fire toast it a little before pulling it back. Izuku hummed, entranced by the explanation. So, whatever you burn is replaced by the next strongest emotion I feel towards them. And you aren't actually boosting me, you're just removing my strongest emotion towards things, right? That is correct, child. Now, rest for the day. Tomorrow I will begin teaching you how to wield me. Izuku almost hollered in excitement before remembering his surroundings. He contained the sound, but was unable to stop the mile-wide smile that spread across his face. Yes, sir. Unfortunately for Izuku, he would not have time to rest, his mother ushering him out of his room only an hour after he had gotten home. We have to get you checked by the doctor again. There's no way you're missing the toe joint if you developed a quirk. Izuku was reluctant to go to the doctor again. He had been diagnosed as mentally ill the last time he had hoped for a change after all, but he steeled himself and followed his mother into the car. As they approached the clinic, Izuku fought with the words that seemed to be stuck in his throat, his voice choking as he tried to express his worries to his mother. Mom. He managed to croak out as they parked. She looked at him curiously, halfway out of the car already. He liked his lips, struggling to shape the words through them. You'll believe me this time, all right? He hated how desperate his voice had gotten. You won't take me to another psychiatrist, right? His mother softened. Oh, honey, didn't I tell you? I should have believed you from the start. I'm not going to break that promise now. She cupped his cheek as she spoke, wiping the unshed tears from his eyes. Now come on, I'm going to rip that doctor a new one. A shocked laugh burst its way from Izuku at his mother's statement. As his worries were assuaged, he felt like he was deflating like All Might did, stress leaking out of him like a broken pipe. He followed his mother into the clinic, a small part of him wishing he would see his mother talk down to a doctor. Izuku received his wish, and then some, as the doctor cowered under his mother's wrath after it was revealed he had simply looked at Izuku's old x-rays from when he was 6, not taken new ones after her son described a voice in his head. After Izuku pulled his sword out and made it emanate heat, and the doctor pulled his jaw off the floor, new x-rays finally confirmed Izuku's hopes. He only had one joint in his pinky toe. He was Deku no more. The physical confirmation of his newfound quirk eased Izuku's heart more than he thought it would. He felt like his body fit him, like he was at peace with himself. He wondered if it was ridiculous to feel like that over a single joint, but threw it aside for the joy he was bursting with at the moment. In the comfort of his room, Izuku was still riding the high of his newly registered quirk, and as he slept, he smiled, mumbling the newly named quirk in his sleep. Burning Soul, the voice mumbled quietly, hoping not to wake its wielder. Not a terrible name, but it's nothing compared to my true name. I'll accept it for now, boy, but you had better become worthy fast, before I run out of patience. Wake up. Izuku woke up slowly, his body protesting the early rising. He groaned, looking at his clock to see the numbers 4 a.m. blinking back at him. He blinked groggily, before turning around and putting his covers back up. No reason to wake up this early on a weekend after all. I said wake up. He jumped up, his heart pounding in his chest. We have work to do, boy. It's time for you to learn the proper way to use a sword. Izuku's weariness faded instantly, his chest warming up in his excitement. Right, I'll get ready now. He jumped out of bed, tripping over his sheets in his rush, before running into the bathroom and running out again in record time, anticipation overflowing from his body. Running out the door while yanking his jacket on, he started walking to Dagoba. I wonder what I'm gonna learn today, Izuku thought as he walked. Maybe I'll learn how to do that fire wave thing I did against the sludge villain, or how to summon full fire instead of just heat from my sword. What if I learn how to burn away my emotions like Soul can do? Izuku's daydreaming was cut short by the feeling of sand under his shoes. Looking up and seeing the pristine beach, he was still amazed by the work he'd put in to clean his new training area. It looked so impossible the first month. He remembered the fear and nerves that had flooded his body when he was first tasked with cleaning the beach. This is what hard work can accomplish. This is what I can do when I truly try my best. Now let's get started on my quirk. He felt his body heat up again, his determination stoking his soul and filling his body. What are we going to do today, Soul? First, summon me to your hand. Izuku complied, the wonder at the simple act of using his quirk as strong as ever as he did. Now, swing downwards, using both hands. Just swing, don't try to call any heat forward. Izuku felt his eagerness dwindle at the simple instructions, but he knew better than to get on Soul's bad side. He still shivered at the reprimand he had been given when he panicked about future tests. Slightly dismayed, Izuku grabbed the handle anyway, awkwardly fumbling with the sheath as he pulled out the blade, and, gripping it firmly with both hands, he swung down as hard as he could. He yelped in confusion and slight alarm as he stumbled forwards with the weight of the blade, his feet searching for purchase on the sand before he fell forwards and on his face, the blade sticking up from the sand beside him. He hummed as he stood, tasting and feeling sand in his mouth. Spitting it out viciously, he rubbed his mouth before he was fully recovered. As he stood, he noticed something, or more specifically, a lack of something. He couldn't hear Soul. Knowing Soul, it's either laughing at me or super upset with me for falling, but I can't hear it. Is it because I'm not holding the sword? He looked over at the sword sticking out of the sand and noticed a slight vibration around it. Cringing in anticipation, he reached out and grabbed the handle. Ha ha ha. Soul was laughing harder than Izuku had ever heard him. The boy noticed. I thought you would stumble a bit, maybe fall on your knees, Soul wheezed through the laughter. I didn't think you'd eat the sand, but... Izuku could feel his face fall until he was staring at the sword in his hand with a perfectly deadpan expression, unimpressed with the sword's continued mocking. Eyebrow twitching, he cleared his throat, feeling his anger rise as the sword continued to laugh. Eventually, the laughter tapered off as his quirk calmed down, a small giggle escaping every now and then. Well, the quirk caught its breath. You gave me a real good laugh, kid, but you can't do that in a fight, so I'm going to be teaching you the basics before we get to any fire stuff. Izuku's ire faded, his attention focusing on his quirk as it continued to speak. First things first, you have to learn to unsheath me properly. You can't fight anyone if it takes you 10 seconds to get your weapon ready, you'll get killed instantly. Izuku winced, partially at how blunt his quirk was, and partially at the realization that the sword was correct. His lack of skill would get them both killed. Luckily, I'm here to help, the sword said. Your mindscape, fortunately for us, keeps a record of everything you've ever even skimmed over. That book you read on martial arts when you were 10? I've gone over it and learned it. Izuku knew what book Soul was talking about. He had picked it up, hoping he could use it to be a hero, but hadn't been able to understand the words in it at the time. He gave up on it then, and had forgotten all about it until now, when Soul brought it up. The videos of heroes fighting villains? I've learned them. I've analyzed every fight you've seen 5 times longer than you did. Get ready, kid, I'm going to run you into the ground. Before you can learn how to use a sword, we have to make your body a weapon. We'll start with bare-handed martial arts. $$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$$ $. Izuku vomited into the sand for the second time that day. His lungs felt like they were about to pop out of his throat, chest aching as he sat in the cold morning air, His heart was pounding wildly against his rib cage, and his legs were twitching, barely able to handle his weight as he stood hunched over, trying to catch his breath. "Straighten up," Soul snapped, his tone strict and unyielding. "Hands behind your head and take deep breaths. You have 2 minutes before you have to run again." Izuku straightened slowly, flinching as his legs and back protested the further strain, and inhaled deeply, savoring the small break he could get from his relentless torturer. He had, true to his quirk's word, been put to work immediately. "Your stamina and strength are high," Soul had said, giving Izuku a little time to preen before cutting him down. "But your speed and flexibility are absolutely terrible. You can barely touch your toes, and you run like a turtle trying to die." Izuku huffed a small laugh as he recalled the 15-minute lecture the quirk had given him on the state of his body, and immediately regretted it as his throat seized and he coughed uncontrollably, expelling all the air he'd been breathing in one violent wheeze. "Run up and down this beach," Soul had demanded. "It's about 5 kilometers round trip, and the sand will give you 2 of the things you need most: balance and speed." Izuku had been confident when he started. Surely running wouldn't be worse than the multiple tons of trash he had cleaned off of the beach. That confidence had lasted until the end of his first round trip. "What are you stopping for?" Soul had asked sharply. "I didn't say stop, boy. Do it again." After the 3rd round trip, Izuku had vomited, the strain of running 15 kilometers at the highest speed he could muster, all while trying not to trip on the sand or slow down, pushing his breakfast out of his body. "Break over, boy." Soul's voice pushed him into action, his body starting to move as he ran to finish the last stretch of his 4th loop. His speed had dropped drastically by this point. He was jogging more than anything, but he continued. A hero doesn't give up, Izuku thought, his eyes blurring as he approached the end of the beach. A hero fights with everything they have to save everyone they can. "I'm gonna be." As he reached the finish, his body swayed, falling as he lost control of his limb. "A hero too." He couldn't stop panting, his chest tight as he tried to breathe. He squirmed, his body unwilling to listen to his brain as he tried to stand. "Gotta get up," he urged himself. "Soul's gonna be upset, I gotta get up and run again." Tensing his core, he prepared to try to stand again. "Enough." Soul's voice rang out. Izuku let his head fall to the ground, disappointment filling his heart. "I couldn't do it," he thought despondently. "I wasn't strong enough." "That was better than I expected, kid." Izuku struggled to lift his head out of the sand again, confused at the sudden compliment. "I thought you would collapse after 15 kilometers, or ask for a break after you vomited the first time, but you just kept going." Izuku heard a tinge of pride in his quirk's voice. "That drive, that willpower to keep going? That's what you need to be a hero, and you? You have it in spades, kid." Izuku grinned at the sky and forced his arm up and into a fist, his body protesting his actions. "Of course I do." His voice came out lower than usual and shaky from the work he had put himself through, but he still tried to force out as much confidence as he could. "I'm gonna be the number one, after all." His arm fell to the side as his body gave out. He stared at the sky, listening to Soul laugh uproariously in his mind. "Good. We must reach the peak before we can implement true change." Izuku thought back to his childhood, to the bullying, the baiting and the beatings, and hardened his determination. "We'll burn it to the ground, Soul," he whispered. "We're gonna burn it to the ground and rebuild it from the ashes." With that, Izuku staggered to his feet and took a deep breath before staring down. "The beach. What else is on the list for today, Soul?" "Well, nothing." Soul coughed awkwardly in his head. Izuku nearly face-planted at the sudden change of attitude. "What do you mean, nothing?" he asked, incredulity coloring his voice. "There's gotta be something else." "I mean, yeah, but you're not exactly in the condition to be trying it right now, kid. You can barely stand." "I can keep going," Izuku protested. "I'm not finished yet." "Yes, you're." Soul's brief bout of immaturity evaporated. "Your body must be pushed, hammered like the steel of a blade, but if you hammer steel too hard, work it too long, it shatters irreparably. You need to stop here, you're going to kill yourself." Izuku tamped down the urge to argue rapidly rising in his stomach. He knew Soul was right, that he had to pace himself lest he destroy his body and his future, But he needed to work harder. Izuku didn't just want to be a hero, he needed to be one. The desire to be a hero was woven into his very being, there was nothing else he could settle for. The faster he could grow, the stronger he could get, the more people he could save. But who can I save if I end my career before it even starts? The question rose in his mind. He needed to listen, he decided, despite the feelings of inadequacy burning in him. Fine, he grumbled. But is this really all I'm going to do for the foreseeable future? Just running up and down the beach? Of course not. From now on, we'll split your running up instead of making you do it all at once. 10 kilometers at the start of our training, footwork drills and stretching to make you more flexible, and another 10 kilometers at the end. Izuku blanched, his earlier bravado leaving his body as he became keenly aware of the pain in his legs. Adding more work on top of that, and the thought of even more being added in the future sounded like a death sentence. A death sentence would be a child dying in his parents' arms because the hero who came to save them couldn't get there fast enough, or was too tired to help and got himself killed. He paled further as that thought crossed his mind, imagining running to help only to see the aftermath, helpless and useless as he watched a family die. He steeled himself, no one had helped him, he had to be stronger. He would be the one who helped, not the one who needed help, he decided. I'll do it. He stated, I'll do whatever you tell me to do, but you better make me the best hero this world has ever seen. You'll shine brighter than the sun, kid. Dollar 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 line break dollar 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 dollar. Izuku could feel sweat trailing up his forehead and his arms burning as he tried to hold the position his quirk had put him in. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 and done. Take a break. Izuku let his arms collapse and fell out of the bridge, his aching back hitting the ground and forcing the air out of his lungs. He lay there panting for a second, feeling the blood leaving his head now that he wasn't upside down anymore, before sitting up and taking a deep breath. You can hold the bridge for 30 seconds now. Soul noted. Your core flexibility is quickly reaching standard, now we need to maintain that along with hip flexion and shoulder mobility. You need to be able to block attacks from any direction, and if you want to learn the fighting style I have lined up for you, you're gonna need a lot more hip and leg movement. Izuku listened, still catching his breath, as his sword outlined future steps to both increase and maintain flexibility. If you don't use it, you lose it. Soul lectured. This is especially true for flexibility, your joints will reset if you don't keep stretching them out, and then we'll be back to doing this again. Do you want that? Izuku imagined having to redo the past month of training, memories of his body contorting as Soul watched and demanded more flashing through his mind, jumping in and out of a ladder on the sand and sprinting through the beach. He shook his head furiously, sweat dripping down his forehead. Now, you should be flexible enough to start learning how to throw a hit. Unfortunately, while I can teach you how to strike, punching the air won't do anything to help you prepare to fight villains. Izuku pet his head to the side. So what are we going to do? We're going to a gym. Izuku's stomach felt like it was climbing his rib cage. Hey, are you sure we need to do that? His voice came out choked. Can't you just teach me with like a punching bag or something? He hated how desperate his voice had become. He had a quirk now, no one was going to beat him up anymore. Right? But what if they found out he had been quirkless? There's no way they would be kind or even apathetic towards him after that. They'd treat him like the people at school did. He couldn't do this, he didn't want to do this. Breathe, child. Soul's voice was strangely gentle, Izuku noted, his breaths coming out faster and faster as he continued to panic. Breathe. Izuku in a breath, snapping out of his anxiety at the sharpened tone his quirk took. I'm sorry. He gasped out. I didn't mean to dash. It's all right, child. You've been dealt a difficult hand in life. But you must overcome this fear of others if you want to be a hero. I don't have a fear of others. Izuku protested, still catching his breath. I'm just nervous about what'll happen if they find out. That is what fear is, child. Soul's voice was gentle again, like it had been before his first time entering the chamber. That will be your biggest obstacle to achieving our goal. Not villains or bullies, but yourself. You have to face the demons inside you before you fight the ones that walk the streets. Okay. Izuku let the breath shudder out of him. Okay, I'll do what you tell me to. You haven't led me wrong yet. He managed a weak smile. And I will do my best not to in the future. Now get up, it's time you learn how to hit someone properly. Izuku stood. He wasn't happy about his new training schedule, but he needed to learn if he wanted to be a hero. So, what gym should I go to? Soul snorted. What makes you think I know? You haven't exactly looked into them before. Izuku blushed. He forgot how limited Soul's knowledge actually was when he acted so all-knowing every time they spoke. Well, let's go look at some together then. He sighed. If we're lucky, we can find one sooner rather than later. Dollar 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 line break dollar 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 dollar. I didn't mean like this. Izuku screamed internally, his face and mind equally blank as he looked down at an orange-haired girl with teal eyes that were currently glaring up at him as he frantically searched for a way to appease her. His thoughts drifted to how he had gotten himself into this situation. He had been talking under his breath to Soul when they spotted a gym on the side of the street they were walking on. Calling the gym shady was an understatement. Its signboard was hanging crookedly, the building walls were cracking and peeling from age, and it overall looked like it was on its last legs. Soul, in his now typical fashion, had pointed it out with a laugh, calling it the rattiest gym he'd ever seen, and Izuku, in his typical fashion, had defended it with a mutter a bit louder than he had intended. The girl had heard him say the words ratty and gym and had marched out, demanding an explanation. Well, she demanded. What were you saying about my grandpa's gym? Tiki too close. Izuku's brain shorted out, not used to girls, or anyone for that matter, being this close to him other than for the express purpose of beating him up. Though, he thought idly, I might not mind if it was her. His eyes involuntarily fell down to her crossed arms, taking note of the muscle cording her forearms and biceps before snapping back to her eyes. Haha. Soul was cackling in his head, incredibly unhelpfully, Izuku thought. Izuku felt the heat rushing to his face increase at Soul's laughter and at the unintentional look before he rushed to answer. I said that it was probably less ratty on the inside than it looked on the outside. He sputtered out, heat overwhelming his cheeks. The girl raised her eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. And who were you talking with about our gym? She took an overdramatic look around, craning her neck and shielding her eyes from the non-existent sun. I sure don't see anyone. Soul's laughter only grew in volume. My quirk. He yelled out in his panic. Wincing and lowering his volume, he tried again. My quirk is sentient, it talks to me in my H-head. It said that the gym looked ratty, and I think it's rude to judge things off of just a look. The girl's face showed zero belief in him. And is your sentient quirk telling you what to say right now too? She asked sarcastically. Actually, it's laughing in my head. He thought sardonically, Soul's continuing wheezing a backdrop for all of his thoughts. I am being serious. Izuku insisted. I'm sure your grandfather's gym is incredible. Her face brightened as she heard him. Then you'll sign a membership here, right? I'm not sure about that, but he was cut off as her face inched closer to his, the smile turning deadly as she did. You will become a member of our gym. It wasn't a question anymore. Why, yep. He squeaked out, face hotter than ever as he tried desperately to lean away from her. Great. Come on in. As she dragged him into the gym. Izuku could only hope that he was right about the gym being better than it looked. Entering the gym, Izuku felt his hopes rise. The gym was definitely more roomy than he had thought, the ring in the middle taking up about half of the available space and surrounded by 3 punching bags and some workout equipment on its sides. Izuku's observation was cut short by a gruff voice calling out. Itsuka. The owner of the voice emerged from a small office that Izuku hadn't noticed. A tall, muscular man walked out, ducking underneath the door sill and looking towards them. He was older, probably around his late 60s if Izuku had to guess, his red hair streaked with gray and pulled back into a ponytail, exposing the tribal-looking markings on the corner of his V-shaped hairline, the lines running down the sides of his face. He was wearing a black kimono, the white underrobe peeking out from the collar and the sleeves, along with tabi socks and black sandals. The top of his kimono was loose, showing the corners of the tattoos as they continued down onto his chest. Izuku started sweating seeing the man approach them. He had no idea who Itsuka was, but the man walking towards him was giving off an incredibly dangerous aura, his body clearly well-trained and used, judging by the scars on his arms made visible as he lifted his hand to cover his yawn. Izuku's mind screamed at him to run, and he was finding it hard to resist, his feet shifting back involuntarily. Soul's voice was deadly serious. Izuku felt whiplash from the sudden stop in laughter, but still listened to the quirk. This man is the real deal. You have to try your best to learn from him, he will increase your training far more than I could even hope to. Izuku had to agree. Despite the fear the man's presence caused him, he could see the proof of his strength in his muscles and scars. As he scanned the red-haired man, he noted the posture he took even in the guise of being relaxed. His arms were slightly raised, palms open as if to block or catch a hit, and his left leg was slightly ahead of his right, ready to block a strike to his lower body. Izuku nearly jumped as the man vanished and appeared in front of him, his body lowered to look him in the eyes. The man hummed as he eyed Izuku up and down, before grinning. "You've bought a good one, Itsuka." The orange-haired girl, or Itsuka, he supposed, spoke up incredulously. "This chump?" she asked, her voice a mixture of ridicule and disbelief. "I bought him in here to make him pay for a membership, and you're telling me he's something special? No way, Grandpa Renji." "The man," Renji, Izuku noted, huffed in slight disappointment, turning to his granddaughter. "You've got a long way to go if you really think that, Itsuka." Renji turned back to him, the hair on Izuku's arms raising as he did. "Tell me, kid, what's your name?" "Emidoriya Izuku, sir." He replied, tacking on sir in the hopes of appeasing whatever this man thought of him. "I'm Abarai Renji, but you can call me Renji-sensei from now on." He pushed forward, ignoring both Izuku and Itsuka's protests. "Tell me, Izuku, what did you notice about me in those few seconds you were analyzing me?" Izuku blanched, fearful of having antagonized the menacing man. "Why you caught that, sir, I mean Renji-sensei?" He corrected the title as the man raised an eyebrow at him. "I did. Your answer." "You're right. I noticed your, body first." He cringed as Itsuka snorted in disbelief. Before she could say anything, Renji lifted his hand up, the girl falling silent as he did. He rolled his hand at Izuku, motioning him to continue. Izuku thought, his fear driving adrenaline through his body. "I'll give him what he wants." "Your body is very muscled," Izuku began, heart racing. "It might not look like you have that much muscle since your clothes fit loosely, but the brief moments it clings to your chest as you walk shows the muscle present, and your arm does the same when you lift it. You have scars all over your arms, and there's some peeking over your kimono top too, meaning you must have fought often, and most likely lethally looking at some of these scars." He motioned to the corner of a deep gash at the top of Renji's collarbone. "A strike that deep and that close to your neck had to have been on purpose, meaning you probably fought illegally, either in underground tournaments or cage fights. You're still here and old, so you must have survived all of those, meaning you're incredibly dangerous." Izuku could faintly hear Itsuka's disbelief, a gasp this time, but was too zoned in to pay it any attention. "Your posture when I walked in was defensive, you covered your vitals with your hakama sleeves to make sure no one could get them definitively, and your palms were open and towards me like you were preparing to catch a swing. Your leg was forward and raised slightly on its toes, meaning you were ready to block a hit to your lower body, or kick back. Lastly, the tattoos on your chest and face are incredibly noticeable, meaning you're either a current Yakuza or an ex-one who isn't ashamed of your past. So, in conclusion, you were an illegal fighter for the Yakuza, a dangerous one at that, and they probably have a strong presence here for you to be unashamed of your tattoos." Izuku gasped as he came back to his senses. He looked wildly around him, worrying he was about to get killed for his disrespect, until Renji laughed in amazement. Izuku stared at him in disbelief, not noticing Itsuka giving him the same look, until the man stopped laughing, a stray chuckle escaping him still. "Man, Kid, I didn't think you'd figure out all of that from that small glance. I thought you just noticed I was dangerous, not all the rest. Renji wiped a small tear from his eyes. You're a bit wrong though. I was a Yakuza, but more recently I was a vigilante. I got roped into a vigilante group after their leader beat me in a fight, and before that I did fight for the Yakuza. The tattoos are out because I helped take the group down, not because I'm proud of them or because they're still around. Izuku nodded faintly, still wondering why he wasn't dead. I like you, kid. Tell you what's your goal for the future? Izuku's eyes zeroed in on the man, his fire stoked by the question. I'm going to be a hero, Renji-sensei, and I'm gonna change the system while I do it. Renji laughed again, a deep laugh that erupted from his stomach. That's good, kid. That determination will drive you a long way. Izuku smiled slightly. I've heard that before, sensei. His new mentor nodded, his laughs dying down. I'm sure you have, kid, I'm sure you have, he said, before clapping his hands together. So, how can I help you? What are you trying to learn? Izuku smiled, more confident this time as he started explaining his needs to the man, both men accidentally ignoring the orange-haired girl on the side, who looked between them in shock before huffing in anger and leaving, slamming the door behind her. Once Izuku had finished explaining what he wanted to learn and the basics of his quirk, Renji started to think. Now sitting down ringside, he cupped his hands over his face as he did. Izuku watched eagerly, waiting for his surprise sensei to guide him. Izuku felt his anticipation continue to rise as the man sat, jumping up as the man snapped his fingers. Muay Thai, the man said, a smile spreading across his face. You're gonna learn Muay Thai, specifically a subset of it called Muay Thai. Izuku smiled but was slightly confused. I've heard of Muay Thai before, but what do you mean, a subset? Muay Thai has 7 different types of fighters, from heavy punchers who eat hits on the way to punch you out, to Muay Plum, a grappling and clinching-based fighter who eats hits before pulling you to the ground. Muay Thai is a style based around kicking. The fighter uses push kicks called teeps to maintain distance before shooting off a round of kicks. Renji explained. The point of the style is to make people suffer for even trying to get near you. The second someone comes at you, you throw out as many kicks as you can, and if you do it right, you'll at least slow them down, if not completely debilitate them with the kicks. Izuku was listening intently. The style sounded good, but he wasn't quite sure why it was suited for him. His legs weren't especially long or muscular compared to the rest of his body, and he couldn't help but be disappointed. He had always imagined himself punching when he thought of being a hero, emulating All Might. The reason you're going to be focusing on kicks, Renji continued, oblivious to Izuku's struggle, is because of one big, sharp reason. Izuku felt his eyes widen as comprehension dawned on him. That's right, kid. Renji seemed to have noticed his understanding. You have a sword, your hands have to be the least involved in your fighting style unless you don't want to use it. Muay Thai will let you keep your hands a bit safer and help you keep range in case you decide to pull it out in a fight. It's the best option for you and your quirk that won't result in you neglecting your body or your quirk. Izuku was nearly jumping in place now. He couldn't wait to get started. How are we gonna start? Izuku asked, his impatience leaking through into his voice. Renji grinned before pointing to one of the bags lining the side of the gym. You see that? Izuku nodded, slightly confused. Go kick it. Izuku suddenly wasn't quite so impatient. Sighing, he moved to the bag, touching it with his hand before squaring his body into the best imitation of a fighter's stance he could manage. Let me guess, he grumbled. Only stop when you say I can. Renji raised an eyebrow at him, confused. No. Izuku felt his hopes rise. 200 on each leg should be good, and then felt them fall. Renji moved towards him, his eyes scanning Izuku's form. This isn't a terrible boxing stance, but you're not doing boxing. Stand like this. Izuku looked closely as Renji took up his stance, arms raised to a little below elbow height with his hands open, palms facing outwards. His left leg was forward, raised slightly onto its toes as he let it bounce, and his right leg was back and steadier but still able to move. He was leaning slightly forward, his chin tucked. Are you left or right-handed? Renji asked, returning to his normal posture. Left. Izuku responded. Then put your right leg forward as your lead leg instead of the left like me. Your lead leg is the one that you'll use for lighter, faster hits, while your back leg is going to be your weapon of choice for heavy hits. 4 fast hits, push off with your back leg, and turn your shoulders slightly into the direction of the kick, or to the left for you. The power of your kicks comes from the torsion you can generate with your hips and abdominals, so really focus on those when you hit. Renji kicked the bag, once at what Izuku assumed was fighting speed, and once slower to demonstrate. Izuku was taking furious mental notes, his hands twitching as he itched for his notebook and pencil to write it all down. For heavier, more powerful kicks, Renji continued to explain. Push forwards with your right leg, switch your legs with a little shuffle step, and then turn your upper body about 45 degrees to the right. As you throw your leg forwards, you're gonna throw your left arm down and keep your right hand at your face for defense. That'll help you generate some extra force in your kicks. He demonstrated again, once fast and once slowly, before turning to Izuku. Now you try. He motioned at the bag. I'll be right here watching every one of your 400, and I'll let you know if your form slips. Izuku prepared himself, jumping up and down to loosen himself up before squaring himself with the bag and throwing his first of many kicks. Izuku limped into his house, his shins were numb with pain, and his legs could barely hold up his weight, but his sense of accomplishment wasn't diminished by the aches in his body. He hobbled his way into the kitchen, his mom nowhere to be seen, but a plate of food covered with a note attached sat on the counter. Working late today, left some food for you. Make sure you eat it all, my little hero needs to get his protein in. Izuku wasn't sure he'd ever stop feeling the giddiness that rose in him when his mom supported his dream. He had fantasized about it for so long, and now it was a reality. Part of him still couldn't believe he had reached this point. He considered as he heated up the plate of food, it had been just over a year since the days he had feared Bakugo's retaliation too much to train properly, and now he was learning how to fight? It just felt so unreal to him. As he finished his meal and put it in the sink, he wrote his mom a little note of appreciation before crawling his way up the stairs and into bed, falling asleep almost instantly. Inko walked into her home a few hours later, noting with relief that the food she left had been eaten. She walked over and saw a new note on top of hers. Reading it, she smiled and let out a watery laugh as tears formed in her eyes. Thanks for the food, Mum. I'm training hard to be your #1 hero and son. I'll make you proud. Signed, your little hero. You already have, honey. She mumbled happily, you already have. Dollar 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 line break dollar 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 dollar. Izuku longed for the days when he could wake up without his body aching. He remembered his beach cleaning days fondly, when his biggest worry was the next piece of trash and not the risk of his shins breaking clean in half. 3 months into his Muay Thai training and his body was expressing its dissatisfaction every waking moment since he'd started. Still, Izuku considered, stretching as he left his bed. At least I'm improving. His training had been going more than smoothly, according to Renji-sensei. He was above the level of most amateur fighters by now, and could probably absolutely destroy an untrained thug on the streets. Izuku wasn't as sure about his skills. While his time with Renji-sensei had started melting the cold block of fear in his mind, he was still scared that he wouldn't be enough to keep those people. Bakugo had left him when he was determined to be useless. His mom, while kind now, hadn't supported him then, and he had grown up being ostracized for his uselessness. The people in his life now, like Renji-sensei, All Might, and his mom, wouldn't they leave him too if he couldn't keep up? Mom only started supporting me when I got a quirk. He remembered, his face souring as the now familiar thought came to mind. Same with All Might. And Renji-sensei doesn't even know how useless I used to be, but he'd leave for sure if he did. Izuku's thoughts continued to spiral lower and lower as he left his house, his face stormy as he tried and failed to expel the negativity from his head. As he entered the gym, he started fumbling with his key card, seeing the orange-haired girl, Itsuki, he remembered, standing in the ring with her gloves on, seemingly warming up. She turned towards him at his entrance and smiled viciously underneath her helmet, sending shivers up Izuku's spine. His feet shuffled immediately, ready to run before Renji-sensei popped out from behind one of the ring posts, smiling at his pupil. "Hey kid," he greeted cheerfully, failing to disperse Izuku's nervousness. "We're gonna be doing something a bit different today, he pointed at Izuku, "are gonna be fighting my granddaughter over there." His finger moved to Itsuka, who clenched her teeth and pounded her fists together. Izuku gulped. It was like he could feel the anticipation pouring off of her body in waves. It was bearing down on him like the air had become heavier around him. He shuffled again, his legs starting to tremble a bit as images of Bakugo flashed through his mind, the oppressive aura surrounding the girl reminding him of the same aura that emanated from his childhood friend. He startled as he felt an impact against his chest. Looking down, he saw shin pads, a helmet, gloves and a mouth guard being pushed into him by Renji-sensei's arm. He looked up again to see the man smiling at him. "Get in there, kid. I believe in you." The words did nothing to help Izuku feel better. If anything, they made him feel even worse. He was about to get pummeled and let his sensei down at the same time. He was frozen, the pressure of the situation freezing his legs to the ground before he forced them to move. Slowly, jerkily, he made his way to the other side of the ring, beginning to strap his equipment on. "Soul, what do I do?" he muttered, his breath quickening. "She's gonna kill me." He waited for the familiar, soothing voice of his quirk to call back to him, but felt and heard nothing. "Soul?" he asked again, panic mounting. Before he had time to ask again, he was dragged to his feet by Renji-sensei and was led to the middle of the ring. He looked around frantically, begging anyone to help him out, get him away from the inevitable loss and the cruelty that would follow it. "All right, kids, touch gloves." And just like that, Izuku's fate was sealed. The world faded out. He could hear his breath whistling through his ears, his heart pounding in his chest, and he could feel sweat dripping down his forehead. He tried his best to enter his stance as he reached out and touched her gloves, but his legs were shaky, and his arms wouldn't move right and he couldn't breathe and they were gonna hate him. A fist connected with his jaw. He hadn't tucked his chin in his panic and it cost him. He wheeled back, foregoing his stance completely, and tried his best to dodge or block hits. He felt like the world was closing in around him, the hits were connecting but the fists were starting to look smaller and smaller in his eyes, until they resembled the ones that beat him that day at the creek. He had only wanted to help. Why were they hitting him? He curled up, his head coming down and his arms going further up, trying to protect his head. He hadn't meant anything by the gesture, his body just moved on its own, so why was Kaken beating him up? Why were his friends helping? Wasn't he their friend too? The punches stopped. Izuku looked up, the visions of Bakugo and his friends fading as he saw the girl he was supposed to be fighting, tears in her eyes as she glared at him. "Why aren't you hitting me back?" she cried out, her fists clenched the best they could be around her gloves. "Do you think that you'll hit me too hard, or that I'm too pretty to get hit?" She marched towards him, and he scrambled back as she got closer until his back hit the post. "Well, I'm not. You won't win. I don't care if Grandpa is teaching you instead of me, or if you do want to be a hero. I want to be one too. I'm not fragile." Her voice cracked at the last syllable before dropping to a whisper. "I'm not useless." Izuku's world cleared at the last sentence. What had he done? In his panic, his fear, he had subjected this girl to the same treatment he had gotten. He had ignored her feelings. She must have been suffering, Izuku realized. A random boy coming in and taking her grandfather's attention. It must have felt like a slight against her for being born wrong, and now that same boy was in front of her, and he wasn't even trying to hit her? She probably felt 10 times worse. "If I can't help her," Izuku felt his determination rise as his body did, his feet squaring towards her in his practice stance, his body no longer shaking. "What kind of hero will I be?" "You're right," he said, his voice calmer now. "You're not useless. And I'm sorry. Let's try again." She scoffed but put her hands up, desperation leaking from her like water from a pipe. "Don't try to act all confident now, rookie." She sneered. "I don't care if Grandpa trained you, I've been training way longer than you." Izuku shoved the fear that rose in him down at the words, burying it, no, burning it away as he smiled. "I don't know about that," he teased, adrenaline pumping through him. He said I was pretty DMing good. She scowled before darting forward, her hands close to her body and swayed. She was a boxer, Izuku realized, meaning her quirk probably focused on her hands. His thoughts drifted for a brief second before he pushed himself back to the present. He watched her approach closely, and still almost missed the moment she pushed forward. She ducked as her back foot rocketed her forward, almost disappearing from his vision. He managed to look down before she threw an uppercut, and leaned back, throwing his right arm down to gain momentum. This is my chance. She was slightly off balance, not having expected him to dodge. He hesitated for a split second, not sure about hitting her, before remembering her words, the raw emotions that had poured out of her. Stealing his heart, he squared his feet to her, turned his torso 45 degrees to the right, threw his right hand down, and launched a kick at her with his right leg, holding back slightly. It was still sparring, he reasoned, no one goes all out when sparring, right? He watched her eyes widen, surprised at the retaliation, before they sharpened, the desperation leaking from her seeming to ebb as she saw him fighting. She raised her arm to her face, blocking the kick from connecting with her head, but the block was too hastily made. His kick slammed through, forcing her elbow to connect with her head and shaking her up. She stood up quickly but swayed slightly, her left arm rising slightly too high. Chance! This time, Izuku didn't hesitate. His body moved with the memory of the tens of thousands of kicks he had done over the past month, and he rocketed his leg into her ribs. Her body contorted around his leg, and she let out a quiet oomph as the air was forced out of her lungs. She staggered back, looking up at him. First, it was disbelief, then it was satisfaction, and finally she smiled ferociously. He had proven himself. Now I gotta survive the aftermath. He prepared himself as she lunged towards him. The same way she had done at the start of the fight, this time, he wouldn't lose himself in the past, he would fight to save Itsuka from hers and overcome his here and now. He launched another kick, preparing for either a dodge or a hit, but was surprised when she caught it, cradling it between her arms and her ribs. I'm a kickboxer, she said, grinning up at him. Don't get too caught up in my arms, rookie. She yanked on his leg, pinged her other arm back as she waited for him to get in range. Got you. Izuku thought, his mind uncharacteristically vicious. He waited for her to throw the punch before ducking under it, his palms hitting the ground and supporting his weight in a semi-handstand as he threw his other leg up and forwards towards her head. Manji kick. She hadn't seen it coming, but managed to lean back just enough so his foot clipped her chin rather than connect fully with the side of her head, but kept hold of his leg. Izuku cursed. He had hoped to make her let go of his leg with his earlier move, but she had just barely dodged. He twisted his body slightly more, his caught leg aching at the decision, until he was facing the opposite direction from her before throwing his foot back in a flurry of mule kicks. This time, she was forced to let go, stumbling back to avoid the storm of hits. The two regained their balance, Izuku favoring his right leg as the pain of his ankle and knee twisting in her grip made its presence known, and Itsuka stumbling slightly from the two connecting head kicks. They both took a slight break, circling each other as they eyed each other up. They rushed back in, trading hits and grapples. Izuku could feel his stamina drain as they continued to exchange blows. He hadn't trained as much as her, after all, and while kickboxing didn't suit itself particularly well against Muay Thai, she had obviously supplemented her learning with some sort of grappling technique, one that made his kicks much more dangerous to throw. Izuku saw her smiling, and an answering smile rose to his face as he launched a front kick into her stomach, forcing her away. This, Izuku thought, catching a punch on his arm before swinging an elbow back. This is so much fun. Izuku couldn't recall the last time he had had this much fun, his blood pumping and sweat flowing, adrenaline rushing through him as he gave his all against someone who was doing the same. It feels so good. He pet his arm back, throwing across. When she dodged, he let the momentum carry his body forwards, nearly flipping over before catching himself with his hands and his left leg. One more time. He threw his right leg forward, his other leg on the ground, adding that much more power to his strike. Manji kick. Itsuka leaned away, his leg brushing past her face as she dodged. I've seen that one already, I won't fall for it again. She cried out as she prepared to throw her fists down at his head. Izuku knew he would be out if she got him now. He had no defense, his arms were both still on the ground, and his leg was still in the air. But, I don't want this to end yet. He snarled as he put all his weight onto his arms, ignoring how they screamed in pain, lifting his grounded leg to follow his earlier kick, catching himself on the toes of his left leg as he swung the heel of his right towards her with all the strength his core could eke out. Bet you haven't seen this one yet? His face contorting into a victorious grin, he had aimed at her ribs, and with her leaning forwards for her punch, there was no way she could dodge this now. Even as the thought crossed his mind, she smiled back, victory in her eyes. I did though. She fell back into a bridge. The punch had been a feint. He realized as the second leg swiped just over her body. He fell over, his arms unable to maintain the position in the face of his leg's momentum, and she took the opportunity, rolling him over and pinning him to the mat with his arm in one hand and her palm on the back of his head, shoving his face into the ground. He felt her yank his hand back, torquing his shoulder until it was just slightly painful. He squirmed for a moment, but fell limp soon after, his body too tired to muster up the energy to even try escaping. He let his left hand, pinned under her knee, tap the ground 3 times, and she rolled off of him, falling onto the mat herself if the sound she let out was any indication. He rolled over, facing the ceiling. He could feel the pain all over his body, from blocked and landed hits, could feel the sweat caking his body and cooling, could feel the exhaustion rush over him, but more than anything, he could feel the exhilaration of the fight coursing through his veins. He let out a laugh as he stared at the ceiling of the gym. That was effing awesome. He breathed out, still panting from the exertion. God, I should have done that sooner. Itsuka snorted next to him, turning his head towards her. Yeah, you should have. Wanna tell me why you had that weird 180 mood switch? She had said it sarcastically, not really expecting an answer, but Izuku, running on the high of his fight, answered anyway. I used to get beat up as a kid. Like a lot. When you started punching, I had a bit of a flashback or something to one of the worst days. You said you weren't useless, that's why I had to fight back. He turned to her, his eyes shining with grit. They bullied me for not having a quirk, I developed it late. Neither of us are useless just because of the way we were born, and if anyone says you are, then just hit them like you did to me. Itsuka's eyes widened, before she turned her eyes to the side. I know that, idiot. Her voice was quieter and slightly wet. Izuku pretended he hadn't noticed. When the two of them got up, they were greeted by Renji-sensei, who was ecstatic about their fight. Itsuka, your grappling has improved so much. And I've never seen you fall into a bridge that smoothly before either. Izuku snickered as the tough-as-nails girl who had just beaten him blushed and pulled her ponytail in front of her mouth, hiding from her grandpa's compliments. His snickering was quickly cut off by Renji-sensei moving on to him. And Izuku, what a performance! The start was a bit rough, but man, you really got it together. That cartwheel kick was something else, I don't think I showed that to you. It was Izuku's time to blush as Itsuka laughed. I kinda just moved? He said, unsure himself of why he had done it. I couldn't think of anything else that wouldn't leave me completely wiped. I mean, she had my leg in a lock, I had to go for something big to make her let go. The manji kick was just the first thing that came to mind. Renji-sensei laughed enthusiastically. Great. Keep practicing that, what did you call it? Manji kick? Yeah, keep practicing that. Itsuka here, he ruffled her hair, her face growing redder. Has been practicing since she was a kid, and you nearly took her head off. Itsuka scowled at that, the effect ruined by her bright red face. You've still got a long way to go before you beat me, rookie, don't get the wrong idea. She glanced over at him, her eyes softening. But you weren't that bad. She said quietly, her face still bright red. He smiled back at her, reaching his hand out for her to shake. You were pretty good too, Itsuka. He said as she shook his hand, ignoring the small she let out at hearing him say her name. But, his smile turned competitive, and he gripped her hand a bit tighter. I'll be trying my best from the start, next time. I'm gonna beat you. She smiled, her hand gripping his back just as tight, if not tighter. You can try. But why are you calling me Itsuka? Izuku looked back at her, his head peded slightly to the side. Well, that is your name, isn't it? She laughed, her mind apparently connecting dots that he hadn't known existed. Oh, yeah, that's what Grandpa calls me, but my full name is Kendo Itsuka. She laughed even harder as Izuku felt blood rush to his head. You look like a strawberry. She cackled. I called you your first name? Oh my god, I've been calling a girl by her first name in my head for months. He continued to mutter about impropriety and disrespect, Kendo laughing by his side while Renji-sensei watched them with a sweat drop forming on his forehead. What am I gonna do with you two? He smiled, exasperation replaced by fondness. He clapped his hands together. Alright, enough of that. You two still have exercises to do. The two groaned, but rose, albeit unsteadily, and got to work. This time, however, they worked together, not on opposite sides of the gym, or on different days. They laughed and joked with one another, encouraging each other and working harder than ever. When Izuku got home, he had to wave off his mom's concern over the bruises all over his arms, explaining a sparring session to her had taken a while, and by the time he had managed to peel her crying body off of his, the exhaustion of the day crashed into him like a car. He barely managed a shower before he collapsed in bed, out like a light. He opened his eyes. It didn't feel like he had been asleep for long, he thought, still groggy. He yawned, reaching over to his bedside table to check the time, freezing as he touched stone instead of wood. He shot up, tensing and then relaxing slightly as he recognized the pipe hallway from his first test. He was in his mindscape. He followed the pipes, luckily no heat or pressure bearing down on him this time, walking until he reached the chamber of his soul. The bonfire in the middle of the room burned bright, brighter than when he had last seen it, and he walked towards it, entranced by the light. We have much to talk about, child. Soul's voice rang out. Yeah, we do. Izuku's voice was cold, he could remember the panic he felt before his fight with Kendo, the overwhelming fear and the desperate attempts, the pleas to speak with Soul. He had begged the quirk to speak with him, and had been left wanting. Let's talk, Soul.